Hi, good evening. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. It's June 2nd, 2025. Karen, can you please call the roll?
Yes, we have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhimes, Lori Connolly, Jane Fundling, Andrew Coe, Peter Mon, Julia Maxwell, Brian McGuire, and Judy Steele is on Zoom. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Karen. Welcome, members of the Warrant Committee. Thank you all for being here. This evening, we're going to be continuing our presentations on the MBTA Communities Act and one of the two plans that's being brought forward at town meeting. This is specific to Article 6, and this is the article seeking to amend Chapter 275 of the general bylaws by adding a new section for MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District and to amend our zoning map as such. And this is, of course, what we would be discussing as we discussed a 10% plan with the planning board on last Thursday, and this would be the 25% plan. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over. We have two of our citizens here today to discuss the MBTA Communities 25% plan. I want to say I'm very thankful that two members have reached out to me and are willing to help us out in trying to figure out what to do here. Thank you so much. So I'm going to let you introduce yourselves to our television audience and members of the Warrant Committee.
Great. Good evening. My name is Karen Friedman Hanna, and I live at 3 Norway Road. I'm a Precinct 2 town meeting member, and I was the first signer on the citizens petition that you have before you. I appreciate very much the opportunity for us to provide you with our rationale for submitting this and some information about it. After the surprising vote that the planning board took to rescind their decision to allow town meeting to vote on both the 10% non-compliant and 25% compliant plans that they developed with the experts from UTIL on May 13th by a 4-to-1 vote, I received more emails and calls than I've ever gotten in my 30 years of being a town meeting member. Many of them were very upset that the planning board was continuing to promote only an illegal and costly 10% plan, despite many compromises being made when this newer version of the compliant plan was developed by the planning board. Many of the people in the district known as the Elliott Street Corridor, where I live and represent, also worked diligently to help the recent $9.5 million override to pass to allow for just a level spending budget for our town. A non-compliant plan will result in additional enormous cost through both continued litigation and loss of grants, wiping out the portion of the financial stability that our town ensured with passing the override. We, as town meeting members, and each of the committees who manage the workings of our town have the legal and fiduciary responsibility to uphold the law and make fiscally responsible decisions for our town. The signers of this petition felt it was crucial that our representative town meeting was given the opportunity to weigh and vote on all the information in the compliant and non-compliant plans that the experts from UTIL and our planning board created to determine which way our town should continue to move forward on this very, very important issue. One of the co-signers of the petition, Kyle Johnson, will now provide you with some of the details, and after I'll provide some short closing remarks. Thank you.
I'll share my screen so you can should be able to follow along there.
Thank you, Kyle.
Sure. Kyle, I live on Blue Hill Avenue, and I am a town meeting member from Precinct 10. And as Karen mentioned, I'm one of the signers of the petition. I'm going to give a broad, pretty quick overview of the plan and why we have decided to present and endorse it as a group. Let me also say thank you, Warrant Committee, for everything you're doing right now. You have had like one of the busiest years I've ever can imagine, between 3 town meetings and one where you had to look over 2 different budgets. So I appreciate the immense amount of hours that goes into that. All right, so what's going on? As I believe you all know, Milton has a new deadline from the state of July for compliance. And in anticipation of this deadline, the planning board had prepared two plans, a plan that zones for 10% multifamily housing and one at 25%. They had intended to send both to town meeting and had voted to do so, and then revoked the 25% plan. We, as a group of citizens, filed a citizens petition to forward that plan and put it on the warrant for town meeting. So why did we do this? One, we believe that the town should decide together, through the appropriate bodies, what legal and financial risks we're willing to take as a town. We don't believe any one committee should have unilateral decision power over that very serious decision. Furthermore, the 10% plan, or passing no plan at all, we believe would bring significant risks that significantly outweigh the 25% plan, specifically in its financial impact. We also believe that the 25% plan makes very smart planning decisions. It accomplished some very clever compromises between different constituencies that citizens had raised over the past couple of years, and really effectively incorporated community feedback. The risks that we see in the 10% plan. We believe the 10% plan almost certainly leads to expensive litigation. I know there's a lot of disagreement between boards and amongst boards on all things related to the MBTA, but I believe this is now something that is agreed upon between everyone. That the only way that there would be any sort of reclassification, any way that any sort of 10% plan would be compliant would be through some sort of legal action. Senator Driscoll has said that the only thing that 10% leads to is litigation. Our meetings with HLC have confirmed that no negotiation is on the table. Our town administrator has acknowledged that. Select board and planning board members who've met with HLC have confirmed no negotiation is on the table. The only path forward would be through litigation. The idea that has been raised recently is a declarative judgment. And that's been expressed as a sort of quick and easy legal pathway. I think it should be underscored, though, that in any scenario, that would be step one of a long litigation process. All it does is an attempt to find out if the case has merit, and if it does, then you go forward with litigation, with a full litigation that many have predicted would go back up to the Supreme Judicial Court. And if it was ruled not to seem to have a case, there's still opportunities for appeal, and you could still go forward with litigation anyway. So I think, to me, it's implausible to think that that would be the end of anything. We will also say that, in our view, litigation is unlikely to be successful. We have made arguments to the SJC about our classification. The court did not really entertain those, and they upheld explicitly that HLC has the prerogative to define compliance. That was maintained very clearly. Also, as many have raised, the kind of worst case scenario is that it leads to a special master that imposes 25% zoning upon us, may not choose sub-districts that we like, may choose sub-districts that overshoot our compliance target, and we end up zoning for more housing than we would like to. Another key thing we see as a risk is that the 10% plan has several clear planning drawbacks. As some members of the planning board testified to you all last week, there are some scenarios where it may lead to more rapid development than the 25% plan because it has certain parameters that may be more appealing to certain developers in certain areas. It is not designed to encourage commercial development. Although commercial development is permitted, it does not mandate mixed-use development. And many studies have shown that one of the best ways for a town to increase its revenue, its tax revenue, is through mixed-use development, and that it far outweighs the impact of any additional residents from any sort of mixed-use residential. And then I'll also mention that there are potential difficulties backtracking to 25% if we go with the 10% plan. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Just to put the numbers out, this is the cost of noncompliance so far, at least based on the things that are really straightforward to quantify. $300,000 for special counsel, $29,000 of our town council's time toward this litigation that we've already been through, $50,000 for Util Consulting to develop the new 10 and 25% plans this year. That comes to $389,000, and then grants that were either forfeited or that we are now ineligible that we had desired to apply for, leading either to deferred projects or the need to find money for that elsewhere. if they can't be deferred. That brings us to 1.2 million. The 25% plan, on the other hand, we believe it protects our financial future. It avoids costly litigation, it keeps us eligible for grants, and it includes mandatory mixed use, which is a very strong development in our future tax revenue. Other options are still available if we go with the 25% plan. It's not that we've locked ourselves into any particular future. The zoning can still be changed. Norfolk and Lexington have already done so, to my knowledge. Those are the only two that I know of, to my knowledge. And we can continue to pursue litigation regarding classification and unfunded mandate if we would like to. There's no reason that we can't pursue those after we've passed a 25% plan. I'm not honestly sure why it has been presented that way. I assume the thinking is that in the year or so that we are pursuing that litigation and we have a 25% plan, maybe a certain amount of development takes place in that time frame, then obviously we can't rewind the clock. But I would emphasize that that is still the case with a 10% plan as well. Some development will likely take place under the 10% plan in that time frame, as well as 40Bs that are possible risks in certain areas as well will continue to take place. So development is going to be happening either way, with either 10 or 25, and neither one recluses our opportunity for legal pathways. And one other thing on that is that we can continue to negotiate with the state. The idea that passing a 25% plan gives up all our negotiating power, for one, in my view, I don't think the law is a negotiating matter. That's just my general premise. So I don't buy that premise, but even then, we can think of Everett as an example. They passed compliant zoning, very aggressive compliant zoning, and they've been building very aggressively intentionally through incentives that they've been giving to developers. And in turn, the MBTA has extended the silver line to Everett, because if Everett's going to invest in their housing, they're going to invest in their population, then the MBTA saw it was worthwhile to invest in them. As an aside, I'm an adjunct professor at Boston College. When I ask my students for a 10-page paper, and they send me back a 5-page paper, that is typically not the beginning of a negotiation. Like, that doesn't put me in the mood to negotiate. I will give them a failing grade. If I'm feeling generous, I'll let them do it again. But that is not a negotiation. Like, I'm in charge of the rules, they've broken the rules, and there will be punishment. So I think compliance actually is the best way if we want to negotiate on MBTA service investment, if we want to negotiate even on classification. I think the best way to do that is through compliance to show our good faith. Also, a little bit of data I pulled together. And in this conversation, throughout the past 3 years, there's been a lot of conjecture. But I think we need to maybe do a better job of dealing in actual facts, research, and information from experts. The data on the fiscal impact of multifamily housing is very clear-cut and very substantive in the literature. A literature review from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission looked at, and I can send these references to anyone, based on a review of multiple empirical studies of actual towns across the country, determined that tax revenue from multifamily development, especially mixed-use development, significantly offsets new service costs of additional residents. Some Massachusetts-specific data from the Journal of Massachusetts Economy in 2019 found the same result in Massachusetts communities. New housing offers net fiscal benefits to both municipalities and to the state. Impact on traffic, similarly, Delaware, also in that same literature review, multifamily housing in general and transit-oriented housing in particular promotes relatively low levels of car use and ownership, and in my estimation, this is my opinion, mixed mandatory use likely helps with that as well. If you're creating more walkable communities, there's less need for cars. Also on school enrollment, Metropolitan Area Planning Council in Massachusetts found no association between increased housing unit development and school enrollment. So they looked at quite a bit of data across several different towns, and there is no direct one-for-one correlation. Multiple factors go into school enrollment, and housing does not seem to have a direct, immediate impact.
I'm sorry. Could you go back with that again? Did you say that development has no impact on school enrollment?
Correct. That multifamily development has no statistical impact. Of course, in specific circumstances, of course it can. But the point is that there is no clear there's no clear one-to-one relationship where you can predict you build 5 houses, there's going to be X number of children in one district. There's so many factors happening at once that you can't isolate those factors.
What you're saying is that it's zero right now.
That there is no statistical impact, like there's not a direct correlation. In individual circumstances, there can be, of course, but from a statistical perspective. I also looked at an article by a Stoneham researcher, Dr. Troy Lau, who determined that from his own research, looking at similar data, single-family housing produces low tax base, but a high proportion of children. Multifamily has a lower proportion of children, but more tax revenue. And in his view, talking about Stoneham, he recommends more multifamily housing for Stoneham to better balance services and revenue vis-a-vis education. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, please, Macy.
Just going back to your
Sure.
previous slide. So that data, the Stoneham researcher, is it because the multi-unit housing has less space for families? So it would be for young couples or maybe even retired couples or
Yeah.
people, I don't even want to say couple, versus a single-family dwelling that has 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, which would be more suitable for a growing or a young family.
Exactly, yeah. And his was looking at historical empirical data. So when you have multifamily housing, you have a lower proportion of children to units than when you're looking at single-family houses.
So that defies the, as you mentioned the word conjecture, that the more multi-family units we have, that would generate more overcrowding in the schools, and that's not in fact true.
From all the empirical data that I've seen, that's correct. And similarly with what's been raised about turnover rates, so if we have more multifamily housing, seniors move into more multifamily housing, they're not necessarily going to speed up how fast they move into that housing just because it's in Milton. Maybe some people might calculate, all right, I'm going to move a year earlier than I was planning to because there's something nearby that I can afford, okay. But on a grand scale, it's not like leading to the speeding up of seniors leaving their homes. I also was curious to know what's happened in compliant communities so far over the past year and a half, particularly rapid transit communities. And the data is early, and some of it is anecdotal from talking to housing policy experts in some towns. I also heard from the planning department in Newton on a little bit of data. But let me give you the broad trends, and I'm happy to send the details to anyone. Statewide, this was released by HLC this week, 4,000 units across 133 compliant communities. I did some take it all with a grain of salt, some back-of-the-napkin math. That comes out to something like 20 units per town over the past year or so. Granted, lots of caveats. Some towns complied more recently, some a year and a half ago, so that's a very rough average. Among rapid transit communities specifically, early data from Brookline, Newton, Arlington, and Everett, very moderately paced growth, except in communities that have actively encouraged and incentivized development very explicitly. So Brookline, housing policy experts in town I spoke to have not heard of any that has been built yet in Brookline under MBTA zoning. Arlington has confirmed 2 net new units over the past 18 months. Everett has seen a stronger amount, but they've been actively giving incentives to developers and zoned areas that were ripe for redevelopment. But even with their aggressive approach, at the current pace, it's going to take them a decade to see the full build out. And they're actively trying to achieve that. And it's going to take them a decade at the current pace. Yeah.
That's actually 30 per year per community.
30?
4,000 divided by 132.
Well, I treated this as 16, 17 months since
Per year, so annualized it.
Yep.
And some of these communities, though, were already had multifamily in it anyway, so they didn't need to add. Like Milton needs to add, but they don't need to add.
Yeah, sure. I think
Which might be why those 12 communities, like those are heavy cities that have a lot of multifamily, a lot of apartment buildings.
to some extent, like Newton has a lot of open space also.
Well, and they still would have had to zone for net new units.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they all would have had to hit net new units.
Yeah.
So all of them are increasing how much is zoned for and how much is possible to be built.
But existing zoning, for example, like Brookline, that runs like on Beacon Street.
Yeah.
There's tons of multi-family units already.
Right.
So So they would have already complied, I imagine, right, with 25%?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll curious to see like if their net new matches kind of.
I'm just curious, yeah.
Yeah,
because
that's a good
because
question.
Those are existing, I mean, those are long-standing multi-family dwellings.
Correct. Yeah.
For decades.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
I thought that Brookline was supposed to zone like 7,000.
I believe they did.
And their net
They are zoned.
1540. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Macy and Lori?
Yeah.
Yeah, as you were speaking
7,000,
of Brookline, Lori, you're right, the MBTA wanted $7,000 of units, and because
It's on the chart.
a significant portion of Brookline is already multifamily, overwhelmingly so in a way, they ended up having really not a lot of choices to zone. So they were overlaying on these already existing multifamily. And because of that factor, they ended up with only 700 net new on a 7,000 obligation to this law. So, the speaker, I don't know, my Zoom is kind of whacked up here.
Judy?
Mr. Johnson, I believe, Spencer.
Yes.
Johnson.
Judy, you have a question?
Yeah, so to your point, using Brookline, having no build-outs at the moment, I think you have to really dig into Brookline's position regarding their passing of zoning and understand the layout of that town.
Yes, absolutely.
So there is no new build because nobody's tearing down a 12-plex condominium on, St. Paul Street and putting up another brand-new condominium building. It's just a matter of knowing the layout of that town. So using Brookline, in my opinion, as an example of it's going to take, many centuries to build out there, might be looking at a different rapid transit community for that argument. That's just my opinion.
Absolutely. Each of these towns have individual circumstances that anyone is, certainly encouraged to dig into. But I wanted to highlight a few that are also in the rapid transit that we do have data on currently, and that's the data. And then, there are different ways we could dig into how to interpret it.
It is data, but anyone can skew data.
Hey, Judy, we're gonna Warrant Committee, can we not have the lengthy comments? If there's a specific question, ask Mr. Johnson.
Well, it kind of was a question of why we're using Brookline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Right. So anyway, what I've seen from that data is very modest growth in Brookline, Newton, Arlington. Everett's more aggressive, but still take a decade at their current pace, and they're actively encouraging it. And then, of course, the statewide average is also pretty modest from what's been seen so far. But again, lots of caveats on that number. Oh yeah, and I'll note that our current zoning, passed 85 years ago, was designed to produce a population of 60,000 people, which has not happened yet.
What year was that?
Well, I gotta work backwards.
38, 1938.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
A lot of changes in those 85 years.
Yes. This is imagining some hypothetical future scenarios, not an exact analysis, but based on some of the risks that we see and that we've discussed, this is what some potential futures look like. In both cases, there's some new MBTA development of some degree, likely. Under the 10%, there's expensive litigation. There's budget crunches or deferred projects from grant ineligibility. There's 40B developments that bypass zoning restrictions, and there's maybe minimal commercial investment since it's not being mandated. And something to think about is if, for example, buildings go up in areas where we would like we would like mixed use, and then later we switch back to a 25%, and those have been built out without commercial, we can't reverse the clock, right? So we could be passing up an opportunity on commercial development that we really want to see and residents really want. There's the possibility of getting stuck where it's hard to backtrack to the 25%. There is that vaguely understood and much debated 2-year moratorium on a zoning article that's rejected, being able to come back to town meeting. And it's possible that if we have difficulty because of that law, we may have to choose different sub-districts if we have to come back and do another 25% plan that may not have as good of output as we would like. Under the 25% plan, yes, development likely, but less 40Bs. All development in these areas go through site plan review. We are seeing commercial investment in areas that we want to see it. And as I've mentioned, we can still pursue litigation on classification and the unfunded mandate if we desired. So I want to underscore that many of the concerns that critics have of the 25% plan, I believe is also a risk under the 10% plan, and in some ways worse. Likely to see larger buildings that don't fit the character of our neighborhoods through 40Bs, et cetera, and has all these financial risks. So to summarize that section, and then I'll get into the plan itself briefly, and then we can just talk through the details. We respect and appreciate the work the planning board did on both, but we disagree that passing a 10% plan is a smart legal, financial, or planning strategy. Now to the plan itself, we want to highlight specifically the way that it incorporated community feedback over the past 2 years to achieve a plan that is more balanced, equitably across the town, is more transit focused, has a lower overall impact, and encourages only modest changes in neighborhoods. In terms of being more balanced, the 2023 plan had 43.5% of its target zoning in East Milton, or 55% of the net new. That is now 15.8% or 19.7% respectively. The Elliott Street corridor absorbed a small amount of that, from 56 to 61 or 44 to 55. And that was, again, in keeping with community feedback, that it made sense that the majority of the zoning be concentrated along the trolley area. But then also some other areas were added along Randolph Ave, the Fairmont area, and the Paper Mill District to continue evening out this distribution across town. It's more transit focused. 78% of the zoning is in the transit area, the 0.5 mile radius, when only 50% is required under the guidelines. And even the areas that are outside of that, there were choices made intentionally about transit. For example, the bus service that's on Randolph Ave was a consideration for zoning in that area. It has a lower impact. The expected net new from the 2023 plan was around 2,000. This plan, net new, would be 1,500. The majority of districts are capped at 3-family homes. Maximum heights are low, and in fact, in many cases, they are more restrictive than our current zoning. So someone could build a huge single-family home in certain areas, and this would actually be more restrictive in many areas. And this is designed explicitly to provide opportunity to resident owners to redevelop their own property, giving economic opportunity to many residents who would like that opportunity with their property. So here's the map. Hopefully you've seen it before. It's small here, but of course you can pull it up on the planning board's website. You can look at UTIL's presentation from May 13 to see this more finalized version of the map. I'll highlight here where these small blinking stars are the districts that are added in the 25% that are not in the 10%. And we can jump back to that as needed. And I won't go through these in detail. We can talk through these. But from listening to planning board meetings, this was the rationale of each district, why it was chosen in terms of transit, in terms of what size restrictions they could put there while still maintaining the density targets, in terms of how to avoid, how we can zone explicitly and in a targeted way to reduce likelihood of 40Bs and make sure everything built goes through our site plan review and our zoning restrictions, and where we can do mandatory mixed use. And then this is the chart, again, also available on UTIL's presentation from May 13. Happy to send this out if you are having trouble locating it. And if you want more resources, I have created an interactive map where you can click on each zone and see the parameters of each, so you can take a look at that at your leisure. And then you can also scan to get the bibliography for this presentation, or I'm also happy to email it as well. And that's it.
So
Well, Kyle, could I ask you, could you maybe email that to me?
Absolutely.
When you get a chance, I'd like to distribute that
Will, yeah.
to the board. I really thank you so much, and thank you for putting that together.
Yep, and I have the zoomed-in maps of all the districts, if we want to take a look at those as kind of an appendix here. And Karen wanted a closing.
Yep,
Yeah,
so
sure can.
just in closing, we as citizens feel strongly that town meeting should have the opportunity to hear and vote on this 25% compliant plan that our own planning board and the contracted experts at UTIL devised. And we really, really hope that our information helps the Warrant Committee to see both the legal and fiscal benefits to support this plan. The plan incorporates the citizens' feedback from the failed previous plan and created a more equitable one that utilizes the 40Bs already in progress, reduces the burden on East Milton, encourages and incorporates mixed use to help bring smart business growth, which the 10% plan does not in the same way, places zoning around multiple parts of the town that easily access all of the forms of transit, including trolley, commuter rail, and bus, and reduces the risk of 40Bs being developed that we have no control over. Multiple attempts have been made to have our designation as a rapid transit community changed, and they have all failed. It's time that we do what is right, what is legal, and what's fiscally responsible for the town. Thank you so much for your attention, and we're happy to answer whatever questions you may have.
Thank you both. Warrant Committee, I'd open it up. Any questions specific to the presentation or anything contained within Article 6 that you may have?
I have my hand up.
Judy, please. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. To either presenter, please. A presenter mentioned the difference between a 10% and a 25% plan in the likelihood of actual building units. So my question goes to this. It was mentioned that the 10% plan will produce more actual units built than the 25% plan. I'm getting there. So listening to the select board the other night on the issue of which percentage plan, there was a lot of mention of the crisis of housing, nationwide, statewide, townwide. So using all of that commentary from the presenters tonight, the select board, various groups speaking in town about this, if we have a housing crisis, why wouldn't we want to get the building going? If we want to get the building going to alleviate this crisis, it seems to me by the presentation tonight that the 10% plan is the way to go, based on that one factor law. Could either of the presenters address that question? Please, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, to be clear, I did not say that the 10% leads to more building. I said that there is an argument that some planning board members have pointed out that it maybe makes, in some areas, more amenable, desirable components that may attract developers more quickly than others. That's a theory, a possibility. So I threw that out as one option to consider. By no means a prediction or a guarantee, just one possibility that has been presented by the planning board that is worth considering. For my own part, I believe in more housing, and I believe in pursuing housing in a way that is moderately paced. And I think that's the best way to balance the crisis with our own needs as a community, and has benefits for us as a community to have more housing, but one that comes at a moderate pace. So that's what my goal would be individually.
So there is no crisis? If
No,
we're gonna go
not at all. There absolutely is a crisis. I just believe that we should.
But see, I'm having a hard time putting those two thoughts together. Usually if there's a crisis, that means an emergency. We need to get on this.
Well, when there's an emergency, you want a cure that responds correctly, effectively, and doesn't create more problems. So I think that's how you respond effectively to an emergency.
So in other words, we're going to delay this crisis for decades.
That's not what it
So
said.
can I'm gonna pipe in also.
I'm trying to put this together, that's all.
Right, so the 25% plan doesn't say anything about waiting. In fact, if there's no legal challenge or referendum vote, if it goes into play from town meeting voting for it, this can go into effect right away. So there's nothing from the 25% plan that says it's going to be years down the road, except if there's developers that aren't trying to develop it, or families that aren't trying to develop it. But it's not because it can't be put into place. So there is no argument about it. There is no challenge with crisis, or this is part of the state coming up with a plan overall, and we're saying we should be participating in that, but in a smart way that isn't making the residents of Milton feel overwhelmed either. We're looking out for both the residents and the broader picture with the 25% plan, not the
So-
other way around.
So if I'm understanding this presentation correctly, then, the 10% plan should not be considered because it would be more rapid development of housing?
No.
The 10% plan shouldn't be considered because it's illegal, and it's not what the state is
I'm only talking
mandating.
about the commentary that was made about development.
That's one
I'm not
potential.
talking about legality of anything.
That's one possible drawback, among others. Not a guarantee. I'm just laying out possible risks.
So it's a risk that we could develop faster on a 10% plan?
It's a possibility that has been floated by the planning
How
board.
is that a risk when, so my question still remains the same. How is it a risk if the intent of this law is to develop housing to address a housing shortage crisis? So how is it a risk? I'm not following that. I mean, the two don't match.
Okay.
Everyone is saying the law is addressing this to address a housing shortage crisis.
Okay. Thank you for-
Okay? A 10% plan, by your calculation as a risk, isn't really a risk if it's going to produce to address what the law wants to do.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. I think I've made clear my point on that.
Thank you, Kyle. Macy, you have a question?
Okay,
I
thank
do, I
you.
have a question. It's actually sort of a statement. So I have in front of me the regulations or the guidelines that were promulgated recently on April 11th. And I'm looking at subsection 72, subsection 5. Does it say, based on your knowledge, that we are categorized as a rapid transit community?
Yes.
And does it say in the guidelines that it's a 25% mandate?
Yes, that's my understanding.
So
of
it's
how it works.
essentially, it's the law that the
Yes.
town must comply.
And the Supreme Judicial Court has upheld that those regulations, if properly promulgated, have the weight of law, and they've been repromulgated.
And they've been promulgated. And the SJC has already considered the town of Milton to be a rapid transit community. So that's already been deemed by our highest court in the state.
I'm not a lawyer. I was very good at high school mock trial, but from watching the Supreme
Yeah, I
Judicial
don't-
Court,
I
that
don't
was
think
my
you need-
that was my takeaway.
I don't think you need to be a lawyer. I mean, I have.
The court actually didn't
rights.
comment on the rapid piece.
It didn't, but it said that the state had the authority to categorize the various towns, or all these towns, in fact, it's not just Milton. So they had the authority to enforce Section 3 of the statute. The only problem with the with the statute is that the executive office of HLC needed to promulgate regulations to enforce Section 3, which they did in April of this year. So they've been promulgated, I imagine it's gone through a public hearing, it's been registered with Secretary of State, so I have them here. And it says in subsection 5 that it is a 25%. So I don't see an option of a 10% here.
Yeah.
I mean, you would be if you're an adjacent community.
Well, there was one very telling moment from the oral arguments of the Supreme Judicial Court when Milton's attorney brought up like the trolley definition issue. And the justice dismissed it. I took that as they didn't think it was even worth entertaining. That was my reading of the situation, since those definitions are pretty clear under state law and have been established for decades.
I have just a quick follow-up question, Tom. And isn't it true that based on these recently promulgated regulations or guidelines, that Milton is subjected to a possible 50%? Am I right about that? Because there's a chart that's attached to the regulations that provide that Milton has a percentage of district to be located in the station area. It's 50%. So could it possibly go up to 50%, but 25% is in compliance?
Oh, no, that's the amount, I believe.
That amount, okay.
That's the
It's
amount
not-
of.
Okay, I wasn't sure where
yeah.
this 50% came from. It's like had percentages for every.
I think that's
and I
how-
couldn't find what these percentages, do you know,
I
Laura?
think it has to do with what amount has to be within the rapid
Right,
transit.
within the
Okay.
rapid transit
Okay.
area,
Okay.
within the half
I was
mile.
just wondering that if there was non-compliance, whether we would end up being 50% as opposed to 25%. That's
No,
all.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
No, but we could lose where it is placed.
Okay.
But it-
We got waivers on that because part of our opportunities in Boston. So they-
Right, that's what I was going to say. So we have part of where it's placed in this plan abuts Boston. And so we don't have the half mile fully on both sides within Milton. And so they've given waivers on that to be able to have it towards, within the half mile of the commuter rail in the Fairmont area. But we don't have to have the full half mile on both sides of it within Milton. So part of that is extended into Hyde Park instead.
Thank you.
But we do hit 78% within that radius in this plan. Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions? Julia?
The number that you presented of units likely to get built out under both plans, how was that number calculated?
Don't.
From UTL?
Yeah.
If you didn't hear that, that was UTIL coming up with those numbers.
Are we talking about the net new or the likely build? Or-
The likely build.
I don't think I have likely build predictions for us.
Can you bring that slide up again?
Let's see. So there's the net new numbers here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
Maybe I misinterpreted. I thought you had likely build out for Milton, but you do not.
no,
Okay,
I don't think they've done that.
Would you mind, sure, was that on the slide? You thought it
Yeah,
was?
would you be able to bring
Yeah,
up
would
the
you be able to
slides
bring up the
again?
slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
This one, the more balanced, it's not up there right now. We might just have, I think.
Do you need to be promoted?
Share
Am I
the
still
screen.
sharing? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me share again.
So it was not this one.
There was the comparison of overall net new. Was it this one?
No, I thought it was a chart, but again, I may have just misinterpreted one of your
Okay.
slides.
There's the parameters chart from UTL. Okay.
Never mind.
Okay, no, it's all right. I'll think if we can think of what that might be.
Does anyone else have any other? Brian?
I got a lot, but
Sure.
do you, just trying to get what you're thinking on this. I don't actually know who to ask, but do you believe the state should be able to dictate zoning on this? Do you guys agree with that?
Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it's an update to Chapter 40A, which is the zoning law of the state. So yes.
You agree with that? Do you think that Milton should be 25 versus 10 or even 15%?
I'm not a public policy or planning expert. I understand it's the law.
Do you think it's fair?
Fair? I don't think I would know enough to know that. I believe it's the law.
Okay.
I think it's fair. I use the commuter rail, I use the trolley, I've used the bus. Many people I know do. That's the parameter that they've set as being a community that can support this. We are close to Boston. It is a community that has options, and I feel it's our responsibility, if that's been defined as something that can help overall, and other communities are making that work, I don't understand why we can't.
Well, you look at something like a town like Quincy, which is the closest to us, which has 4 major stations with a ton of parking and high-speed rail, and we don't have that same thing. We're not equal to them, but they're at 25%, and now we're categorized at 25%. Like, so it seems some inequity in that, in my mind. Like, that's what I wrestle with those other towns, like Brookline, Newton. They have a ton, much more robust subway system that we don't have. So it seems like we're being, in those 12 communities, you look through them all, it seems like we definitely have somewhat of a lesser one. So maybe we're not 10%, maybe we're 15% or something. But it seems to me, I struggle with thinking that we're equal to that, to them.
Quincy is 11,000 mandated for, versus our 2,000, so.
You know?
It's a big difference.
I think there's oftentimes a range, and there's places who are at like the bottom of a range, and there's those at the top of a range. It may not be fully fair if you think about it in terms of that, but does that mean we have the right to just say we don't want to do it just because we don't think it's fair? I don't think so.
Well, and to Macy's point, it's 25%. It's not a fixed number that's equal to every community. Quincy has 25% of their much larger population, and we have 25% of our much smaller population.
Right, but they have a different subway system. That was my point. They have a much more robust
Sure.
system than we do.
I think this has
So
been
there seems
asked
to be
and
some,
answered.
Yeah, can we,
yeah, well, I'm asking
we
it
can have a
again.
discussion, we're gonna have a discussion later.
Okay.
Question.
I'm just asking them what their
Well,
opinion
I'll
is.
say briefly-
So you think it's fair that we're 25? That was the question.
Generally speaking, as from what I have heard and having the criteria that we have 3 different forms of public transportation that easily get people other places, I think it's fair.
Okay. Cars. So I have that, I think, I had that we were supposed to put in 1,700 new units.
In terms of what?
That was versus what we need to get to 25%.
24.
So our overall compliance target is around 2,400.
And we have 700, roughly, something like that, I think.
So, well, it depends on what's included in each sub-district, right? Because my understanding is those have to be in the sub-district. So how those are being counted is going to vary depending on how the plan's designed. And in the way this one's designed, it puts our net new at 1,400.
You said 1,400? Okay.
Yeah.
So 1,400. And in Milton, the average household has 2 cars. State average for apartments is 1.5 per household. So 1,400, that means there's some number between 650 to 1,400 cars, depending on the number of cars we have. They only have to provide 1 parking spot per unit. So that means there's either between 650 and 1,400 cars that aren't going to be left without parking. Where are those going?
Take the two.
Have you thought, like,
Well,
where those should go?
that's a prediction based on circumstances that will change, right? So like how are people going to continue to have 1.5 cars when they only have one parking spot, right? Some people will choose not to. If when I lived in Brighton, I parked my car somewhere else because I didn't really have parking, so I didn't really use it.
You kept your car, though.
I kept my car, yeah, because I was only there for a year.
So some of these things, UTIL can answer better than us because they planned this out. We are from the perspective, quite honestly, that we are trying to have Milton comply with the law, period.
Okay.
And we didn't come up with this plan. It's not our plan at all. It's the planning board's plan and UTIL's plan. And so I'm hopeful that UTIL is going to be speaking at either the public forum or town meeting, and they could give you those answers. But again, our perspective as citizens is we are trying to have Milton comply with the law and save the money from the town's litigation processes. We did not come up with this plan.
Okay.
We're supporting the planning board's plan and UTIL's plan.
But you're coming up with a warrant. You're here because you did the citizens
And we're
petition.
putting forward the planning board's plan.
Thoughts on the cars? Okay.
Right.
Brian, can I go to Allison real
Yeah,
quick?
please.
Allison, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so I just had a question of seeing how you were doing the data and spoke about the number of people that use the trolley in public access. Do you have any information of how many users ride and pick up at each of the locations just in Milton? And I do want to point that do you know the cost of the trolley for Milton? I was told it was, for us to have the trolley, it would cost us $2 million. So I'm just curious if you have the data for how many people daily or hourly, because it comes very frequently. I've ridden it and had the woman comment that nobody was picked up on Keepin Street all day. But I was just curious if you had more information on the data of how many people access and use the trolley regularly. And I have another question after too.
Yeah, I think if we get a chance to talk with UTIL, I think that's a great question for them.
Right, it's not.
Okay, so you don't have any information on how many users daily?
It's not anything that we're basing our request to comply with the law on.
Okay, so, and then do you know how much money, so is that accurate to say that it would cost us $2 million to have the trolley as for transportation for us? So $2 million, is that, do you know how much it costs us?
Nope.
I don't.
Okay. Okay, great. So my next question would be, so you would like the town meeting members to vote on the 25%. Now, we did this, now I just want to understand the processes that we're expecting of the community, because town meeting is not everybody in the community voting, so I just want to understand if, let's say town meeting votes to put the 25% through, but the community would then have to go through the same process we did, that happened last time, and that's concerning, but that, they would vote this in, and then we would have people doing a petition, and we'd have to go to a vote again. So I'm just trying to understand, would that be a possibility again for the town? It just has a cost to the town, as you guys are concerned about.
Well, if you remember, we are a representative town meeting. It's the town who votes us in. We are supposed to be the governing body to make these decisions at town meeting. There is no need to go further than that unless a few citizens decide to. But if town meeting votes it in, it should be law and enforceable. Once, there are processes in place, which is what occurred the last time, we're actually hoping that doesn't happen and that town meeting votes this in and the town accepts it. The more we delay it, the more it costs us, quite honestly. And we don't foresee that as being a good thing for the town. That's,
Would you accurately say, though, that, I mean, it's great to have representation, but it might not necessarily be an accurate representation of town meeting members?
and people should vote for their town meeting members. I don't know how to answer that. That's our government.
But that if the community then formed and the town voted to put it, not comply with it. So that's the only thing I want to make it a point to say that I don't know if necessarily it was an accurate representation if the town voted against complying. So I think it's important to keep an open mind, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Ron, then back to Brian.
I had a comment and a question.
You always do. Always has a comment.
So first, thank you for your work. We are here all the time, and I think this was a very thoughtful and well-articulated presentation. So I think you guys did a good job, sharing your thoughts and your positions. You definitely, it makes it for me, it's much more complicated now because I need to think about a 10% plan and a 25% plan. I don't know, I'm not sure how I feel like handling those two. Have you talked to council, whether it's our town council or other attorneys, on how these two articles should be looked at when it goes to town meeting?
No, other than we know that if the 10% plan is put forth and voted on by town meeting, the Attorney General's office has told us that we will not be compliant. We have till July 14th to submit a compliant plan. A 10% plan under the current law is not compliant. So there is really, how anybody thinks that's not going to end up in litigation, I don't understand. They're telling us it will basically end up in litigation, and all of the things leading up to it have said we are a 25% community. So it's just, in my mind, delaying what is ultimately going to happen with more legal costs involved and more time of us not being able to apply for grants that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't see how that's a benefit to our town.
Yeah, I'll just underscore that I think this is something that everyone, despite all the other disagreements, this is something everyone agrees upon. The 10% plan leads to litigation. Like there's no off-ramp from that.
Thank you.
Brian, want to pick back up?
Yeah. So there's two things that you think we should do this. Two reasons why. Legal and financial, correct? Those are your boiling points. Does it, on the legal piece, does it bother you? What do you think about the fact that they came out with saying that it's an unfunded mandate? And that is technically in litigation now, is my recollection. Is my understanding, I'm sorry. What about that piece? Would you not rather wait to see how that shook out before you file this?
I think it'd be better to speak to someone who's actually an attorney about that. My understanding is that is kind of an independent issue. Because if there's some funding that we didn't get that we should have gotten, there's nothing stopping us from asking for it later.
So you say go ahead with the 25. Okay. So then it's my financial question. I have dug into, did you look at RKG's financial impact
I've
study?
looked at it, yeah.
So I dug through that too. And I have a lot of questions on it, some issues with it, but one thing, they didn't have a final summary. But one thing is that it is going to add to students. And there are studies out there that show you how many students per apartment or multifamily housing you'll get. There are studies out there that show that. And if you say this is a financial matter, because of the litigation, would you change your mind if it was substantially more cost? It's going to be more cost to the town in school cost or town cost or increased cost versus the litigation. Would that change your mind? If it's going to be substantially more, would that change your mind on this? Excuse me.
Yeah, we don't know that, and from everything that we've read, the amount that is going to potentially, even in the larger numbers, not equal out, that the number of students will not increase to that point, that the cost to the town, which is already over $1 million and is only going to go up significantly, everything that we've been told is that that's not going to be the case. And I don't have anything else to say about that.
Well, I'll just say, if we are going to cite RKG, and I don't have an opinion on what to determine about its validity, but their finding was every scenario was a net revenue positive, every scenario they looked at.
They didn't have a roll-up at the end.
They had a table about halfway through that showed the net positive impact of comparing costs to increased revenue of multifamily housing, since multifamily housing is more efficient from a land use perspective and a tax basis. As a general rule.
I don't show it. I didn't see it.
Okay. I can look for it.
Yeah,
At some
I'd
point
love
here.
to see it. Look at all three of the reports, but that's it.
Macy?
I just have a really quick question. I didn't do enough research to find this out, but are you familiar with the legislative intent behind Section 3? Is it not just affordable housing, but perhaps reducing climate issues as well from driving? Because I know there was an issue, and it seems to be an issue in the town, and perhaps you know better because as town meeting members, that the 25% will increase traffic, congestion. I mean, Milton's already a cut-through town, but from what I can see on the 25%, it would actually reduce traffic because it would encourage people to take public transportation versus driving. I don't know if you've heard from the community with that respect, but that seems to be a big issue about parking and traffic.
Yeah, that's my understanding of the intent of the law, that, you know, by encouraging transit-focused development, that you're on the net likely hoping to reduce car dependence, because it's part of the state's overall 2050 goals to reduce carbon emissions and vehicle dependence. And this plan has that in mind, with 78% being near transit. And yeah, every study that I've looked at shows that transit-focused living is less, people are less likely to use cars, especially when there's amenities that they can walk to, as well as we would have in the mixed mandatory use.
And I'm going to maybe bring up a not so relevant issue of other cities, not just in this country, but in the world, where you have beautiful cities that have lots of public transportation, but able to maintain the character and the beauty of, let's say, London, Paris, Tokyo, New York. So it's, I mean, that's a common way of living for a lot of metropolises.
And again, I'll highlight the example of Everett. They made a very, pro-housing direction, and then they received new investment in their MBTA service.
I have more of a comment than anything else. I think I appreciate the thought that went into the presentation. In many ways, I agree with some of my colleagues, and in terms of the fairness question, I tend to lean towards my colleague Brian, because commuter rail, bus, and trolley don't take me anywhere I need to get to, and if I have to take a bus, it adds half an hour. It's just not impractical. Mm-hmm. And so the comment I really have is that with regards to the presentation itself and a lot of the arguments that you've made, one of the things that I struggle with is that there are a lot of false correlations and equivalencies that are in there that turn me off a little, to be quite frank. Whether it's throwing the bus in there, for example, or the comment about the no statistical impact on schools, because it sounds more like there's no clear correlation that can ascribe a number of the impact on schools, not that there is no impact on the schools themselves.
Yeah.
And ineligible, your cost to date chart of $1,193,500 on the 10% plan to date included a column for forfeited grants, which I think is a good data point to have. Ineligible grants aren't grants that are actually realized. I mean, they're potential losses, and so that starts pushing into the speculative space. And so to separate your arguments from speculative to clear, I think you should be very forthright about that, because a lot of the arguments that are layered in there, I really need to think about. And the stats about the communities and development, Judith brought up a really great point about Brookline and what it really means on an impact basis, and to sort of distill it to a simple ratio of 20 new housing units a year, et cetera. Those kinds of arguments are mathematically correct, but don't really paint an accurate picture. And so I think for purposes of the town and for what I need to know, what I want to know are clear facts and clear analogies that accurately paint the picture of what the situation is. And it's important to know what you think are other negative impacts. And then the comment about the town meeting being a representative body, and going back to one of the bullet points that the town should decide. I've never been approached by a town meeting member. I don't know how to reach, I don't have contact information for my town meeting members. And the planning board is also an elected body. And so I think Allison's comment that it's not really the town that is truly voting, but parties that have vested interest in one outcome versus the other, or already made the decision. I don't think town meeting ever really truly solicits feedback from its constituents.
Oh, I do.
And I think
I've held meetings at my house. I've held, planning board members have come to talk to my constituents. They contacted me after this because they watch these meetings. I disagree with you on that. There are several town meeting members who are very active with their...
Several town meeting members?
Several.
Yes.
I know I'm one of them, and I know multiple ones in my precinct who are. So I don't know.
And the flip side of that argument is I've lived in this town for 16, 17 years and have yet to speak to a town meeting member that is my representative.
I'll tell you, Susan Galvin has the entire list and all of our emails. That just, the public emails for them just started a couple of years ago, where they are now available.
I understand that.
So I suggest to you contact them.
Now that I'm a warrant committee member, I'm obviously more adept at figuring out who's who and how to reach them. But I think it's really important to note that you are not the norm.
My area is very much in part of this, and so we needed to make sure, and don't get me wrong, there are probably people in my precinct that are not in favor of this plan, but I live in Precinct 2, which is the Elliott Street corridor, which is completely involved in this.
Which has a vested interest in the matter, right?
Vested interest, and could be a very changed community because of it. So it was very important that we do our homework about it to make sure that we feel that this is a fair plan. So it's coming from the heart and from knowledge
again,
need.
I don't want to get into back and forth on any of these. My point in some really is that I don't view this as completely balanced. And I think you make a lot of valid points, and right or wrong, but what I would prefer, whether it's as a common citizen or as a warrant committee member, is one that really paints a solid picture. And I think there are some things that muddy the waters or are misleading.
Well, as I said, I'll send out all the data. You can read those articles and read those quotes in their original context to make up what you will of them.
Thank you, Andrew. Stephen and then Peter.
Yeah, appreciate your comments. Nice presentation. I've been a town meeting member for a long time as well. We just sat through the last town meeting where we saw there were a lot of people who didn't read the warrant, and they voted to pass something. We had to go back and go back through it again because there wasn't a green sheet. So applaud you for both doing your homework. I think that's terrific. I wish more town meeting members were like you and the folks sit behind you who I know do their homework. It's a really big deal and big responsibility. My question's, being a precinct 7 person, is looking at there's a lower minimum open space requirement for East Milton Square. It's getting pretty dense there. I was just made a comment today to the chair driving down past 440 Granite. That's going to be a pretty tall building, and it's not as tall as the residents at East Milton. So I think you evoked talking about carbon footprints and going towards a plan. I'm assuming Milton doesn't have the money to buy offsets, so we've got to be pretty smart about that. I'm trying to understand both these plans. So I'm looking at pros and cons on both the table. So I think having some more information around your data points would be very helpful for me to make a good decision on this, because this is important. It's a long-term decision. We can't go back. That's one of the things for me why I like the 10 out of the box, because we can go up, right? If we get to 25, like you said, we can't go back down, right? We start higher. Does it take two?
We can repeal it, but town meeting can repeal it at any point.
Okay.
Right.
Lexington reduced theirs, Norfolk adjusted theirs slightly.
Okay. That's helpful.
You can revoke it at any point.
That's helpful.
I mean, obviously, the state law is still a state law, so there might be consequences to doing that. But in terms of our bylaws as a town, we can revoke it at any point.
Okay. And there is, that's it. I get that.
I thought if someone were to start building under the, say, 25% plan, then we wouldn't be able to take that away from them.
That's correct.
True. So while you can change the zoning, once someone's making decisions on their property during that time frame, then for them,
yes,
they're
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
They're in.
That's how we have most of
Yeah,
our homes
that's fair.
in Milton currently. Is they're not built under our current zoning.
Yeah.
Just the issue with Lexington was they couldn't go back and take it away from the people. The ones that got it kept it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I was going to comment on Andrew's comment and add to it that the reason we're here is because the town meeting had voted us in as an MBTA community, and the town itself voted not to be compliant with that. Are we going down that same track again? I guess it's the question. I know you hope not. But again, there is that silent majority out there that basically got a chance to vote and said no thank you. And that may, just speaking to the comments that Andrew.
Well, I'll quibble on silent majority since it was still only a fraction of residents who voted, eligible residents who voted, less than a majority who voted. And we don't know how they'll respond to this plan. We can't predict the future based on the past, and we have a choice as a town and as leaders how we want to lead the town forward and what influence we want to have.
And there was I guess the second thing is there was a preliminary injunction for prohibiting the implementation of state regulation, this regulation that was filed Friday. And that didn't cost the town anything in terms of litigation, I believe, because it was filed by 16 town tax holders and a pro bono attorney. That could have impact on this. I don't know if you have any comments on it.
I mean, if we don't have control of the town, if the state sues us, we don't have control over that. We still have to, manage that.
No matter what, if we remain non-compliant, it doesn't matter if that group is suing on their own dime, we will have to be facing the consequences as a town, so that is going to be on our dime.
We have until July 27th to be compliant, correct?
July 14th.
July 14th, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and we can't, it's too late to schedule another town meeting by that date is my understanding. So it has to be now. It's kind of now or never.
Okay, thank you.
Judy.
Thank you, Tom.
Give her a
My
sec.
question goes to the article. On page 31 of the warrant, it mentions a okay, someone can help me with this pronunciation, severability clause. Could either of the presenters speak to that, what it actually means?
Severability clause on page 31.
Judy, are we on Article 6?
She's on Article,
Yeah, no, it's the letter
Five.
Q, it's on page 31. Severability. From those who know better than
Page
us,
72,
it's
the
standard.
printed
72, okay. I was gonna say, that's a
Yeah, on
10%.
You're using it, yeah. we're
She was
using-
probably using our same
That's a 70.
printout.
Oh, there it goes, okay, it's on page 72.
We've
Oh,
been,
all right.
it's
Sorry.
standard language.
That's my understanding, that language
What does
goes,
it mean? Does anyone know?
well, you'd have to ask a lawyer that could expound on it.
can't.
But I just know my understanding is it's standard, any zoning article would have that language.
Simply means that one,
But concerning this particular article, how will that
means that basically if any,
play into this particular article?
if any subparagraph is deemed invalid, it doesn't make the entire article invalid.
So you have to refer it back, Judy, to, I'm gonna try to do this, to section, hold on. So, it shall be found invalid by court conjunction, that it shall not. So I think this is how I interpret it. So let's just say, I'm just gonna randomly pick, on the same page of 72, development standards, D. So if a court determines that that section, D, on page 72 is invalid, the rest of the article is still valid. That's pretty much what that means. So you're severing the part of the language. So that's what severability means legally.
Okay,
So-
thank you. Macy?
Welcome.
Pretty cool. Anyone else have any questions for Kyle or Karen? Nothing else, Warrant Committee? Okay. Anybody at home?
Lori?
Lori?
I have one question.
Sure.
Did you go before the select board on this?
Well, you spoke at Citizen Speak.
I spoke at Citizens Speak, and they had gotten, obviously, this article. They deliberated on it. We were there as, if they had any questions, but we didn't present to them. This is the first presentation that we're doing. They got the article itself and had to deliberate on that.
But do you know if they voted in support of?
I don't believe they voted yet on it.
I don't believe so. I think they voted to put it on the warrant, I believe, but
But they haven't
Taken a
voted
position.
Right.
to my knowledge.
I think especially because there's going to be the public forum that's coming on June 12th, which in some ways, I hope that you all will wait to hear a UTIL presentation before you make your judgment as well, because again, we're putting forward a plan that was developed by the planning board and UTIL, not us. And so hearing their presentation and being able to ask, very specific questions, I think would be very useful information for you to have that, we're trying to put forth the plan that the planning board and UTIL came up with.
Any other members have any questions of our guest speakers, our citizens?
Just to clarify, you don't have a financial analysis on this though, right? Like what it's going to cost the town? or-
Just the research I've done on general trends on multifamily housing.
So no numbers.
I haven't presented, I'm not a financial
Okay.
analyst, so I haven't done
All right.
a more financial analysis.
Thank you.
Kyle, do you have anything else that you'd like to say in closing or anything? Just like
Thank you. Well, we really appreciate all your time, all the attention you've put into this, and are continuing to put into this. We believe there's a clear path forward for our town that is both legally and financially sound. And any research or data we've presented is for you to pick apart and analyze and determine what you think of it, and see what you make of it. I hope it's helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much for your attention.
I will, yeah.
Thanks, appreciate it.
For your
Yep.
time.
Karen, thank you. Kyle, thank you for sending those things.
Will do.
Appreciate it. And see you at the public forum.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a couple of members who have approached me about talking about this a little bit more with some slides.
No.
Yes. Two members have come forward, Jay and Brian. They have some slides they want to show us. Jay, would you?
I am happy to go first. I'm happy to go second. I'm just
I
happy.
don't mind. Do you want me to go first?
No, well, it doesn't matter. I defer to you two gentlemen, whoever would like to present first.
I'll go if you want. You good with that?
Absolutely.
I did a PowerPoint. It's in black and white, nothing fancy. So I feel like we should all take a deep breath, because this thing has been crazy. I don't know, this is the most polarizing issue in this town. I don't know if it's like post-COVID, post-Trump, post-whatever. Take a deep breath. It's crazy. But one reason that I got on the Warrant Committee, that I asked to be on the Warrant Committee, was watching a town meeting over a year ago, and I was bothered by the fact that people were going up saying, I won't mention the issue because that's also polarizing, but people got up there on an issue and said, well, no financials were ever done on it. And then other people said, yeah, we did financials. No, they weren't. Yes, they were. And I actually looked into it later on, found out that they never were done. And like, I worked for a major company for a lot of years, and like, we could never present anything without having numbers. I mean, maybe they were wrong, but we couldn't present it. So I spent some time trying to dig into this. And I also want to mention, like, kudos to Selectwoman Megan Haggerty for mentioning that. She said, well, what are the numbers? What are the finances on this? So I spent some time doing that, trying to dig into it. And one of the things I did was I looked at the RKG study. That was the first thing I did. So I'll try to run through this and explain this a little bit. Currently, Milton has 9,800 houses, and some of this might be a little data from the previous one because I have different numbers, but basically the population is 28,000 people, so there's 2.9 people per household. Public school population is 15.2% of the town. These are real numbers. I had additional multifamily housing units, 1727. This may have changed with the 40Bs and stuff, but that's what it was that, one point. And if we put in this housing, the effect, if we did this 1,700 units, then the estimated additional students at 15.2% would be additional 766 students, which seems pretty high. I have a couple other scenarios. If there were like only 2 people living in the multifamily unit, then in a state of 15%, was the ratio, it would be 524 students. Another scenario, if it was 1.5 average person per apartment, it would be close to 400 students at the same ratio. But RKG came up with 265, and I'm going to get into that, which I couldn't figure out. And basically, I mean, this is from, a year and a half ago, whatever. But that would mean, the best I could figure it out, and I'm trying to guesstimate how they got there, but it would be 2 people per unit, and about 7.7% of that would be the ratio of students to the population, which is half of what it is currently. And that comes to 266. So that doesn't seem like that makes sense. But maybe it does. But, and then I'm going to talk about each of these numbers. Like, if you did add 766 students, they had a variable cost per student of, I think it was $9,900. I increased it because they were using 2022 data. And if you increased it by how much the school expenses have gone up in the last 3 years, it would come out to $12,000. Their variable cost per student is $12,000, although the actual cost with fixed costs is like $19,000. But the variable is about $12,000 per student. And the estimated cost increases, if it really mimicked what Milton is at presently, it would be an additional 766 students, and it would be another $9 million cost increase to the town on an annual basis. That doesn't even, and I have no idea what the school building cost would be. And I'll just go to the right. If you used RKG's number of 266, was 265, it would be an additional 3.2 million based on these numbers. And I should also add, it would mean either somewhere between 13 extra classrooms needed if you want to maintain 19.8 per classroom students per classroom, 19.8, 13 to 39 classrooms. So you have some idea if you need capital costs. Does that make sense? Yes?
When you say maintain 19.8, we don't have 19 now.
If you add, that's what it is on DESC. And that's because they do special needs. They add that into the equation. That's what their numbers came out to be.
Are they taking in?
What do you mean they add special needs?
Special needs classroom
Right,
with like 6 kids.
yeah.
That's what I mean.
That's what it comes out on
diluting
DESC's
the 30
website.
kids that you might have.
That seems like, talk about skimming data.
Desi.
It's Desi.
I don't know any class, and kindergarten classrooms, fewer than 23 kids.
And then I tried to figure out where they got their numbers. And we sent them an email, and they were very unclear on their response, for what it's worth. But this is what they put in their report. They said, RKG utilized multiple sources of information, including the 2017 demographic multipliers for Massachusetts, actual SAC ratios for existing multifamily properties in Milton, which isn't a lot, by the way. That's another big question. What is that? Because there's only 4 pieces of property that are multifamily. One is 88 Wharf, which is high-end condos, like $1.5 million, so that skews everything. And there's Milton, as we know, has very few multifamily units, which is another reason why we're here. And then SAC ratios from around Greater Boston area, which is also questionable because there's a lot of students, young people, but that's where they got their numbers. And it also mentioned proprietary list of residential development projects, but they never show the numbers. They never told us what those numbers were. Then they talk about, this is just their comment on cost to educate a child, variable cost was $9,700. That's what it was in 2022. I just wanted to put that in there so you could see it. And then,
Brian, can you go back?
Go back?
I'm sorry.
I don't know how.
Oh, forget it. Left arrow.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question?
No, it makes sense. Sorry. Okay,
Okay.
good. Thank you.
So, this is where they came up with 265 school-aged children. And this is an important point. This does not account for any movement of households from existing units in Milton to any new units. So, like, theoretically, you could have empty nesters moving into some of these units, and it would free up houses, and there'd be more kids coming in. But they did not include that in their number. Important point. So, I was racking, I've never figured out what was behind their number, but they have 265. So I dug into it, and I looked on the website. I have 7 different pieces of information on studies that I can share with you the links on, what they say the average school-age children is per apartment unit. And it ranges from, and the smaller the building, the less children there are. The bigger the apartment building, the more children there are. I don't know, but that's the thing. That's a national issue too. But they go anywhere from 0.43 per unit to 0.53 in buildings with larger units, up to 0.54 in units of 50 or more units. And in contrast, 2-bedroom apartments in similar buildings have lower averages, as it says, 0.18 to 0.23 per children per unit. So I have a lot of 7 different studies. And what I did was, I took, so there'd be no question, I took the lowest number students to see, try to come up with a number of how many school-age children there actually were. And so I took 1727, so I split it between 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom, because it does make a difference. And it's 0.18 is the lowest average. These are the lowest numbers that you can get. And 2-bedroom is 0.18, 3-bedroom is 0.43. The population increase total between them, if you split it down the middle, would be 527 additional school children. That's what it gets from these studies. Which would mean there's 221 classrooms, which would be like an additional 2.4 students per classroom if you want to split it out that way. Variable cost per student is $12,000. So the lowest increase that I show from this at 25% would be $6.4 million for the schools themselves, $6.4 million. That's the lowest increase. If you want to maintain classroom, needed classrooms is 27 extra classrooms, and capital cost is question mark. We don't know. So we have, what's the effect on the town budget? CPA, you're going to get an extra $64,000 for CPA, but that's targeted, so you can't use that against anything. That's to go to CPA stuff. Property revenue increases. This is from RKG. They have $1,075,000 that we're going to get extra from that. Excise taxes is going to be $1.3 million. So total income to the town would be $2.3. The variable cost, which is I got from RKG also, which is $1,090 per unit, would be almost $1.9 million, which would add the cost to the town if you wanted to use just the mass average. If you go to the right-hand column, you can have all these other scenarios and play with them if you want. It's easy enough to do. But the total cost would be 8.3, which would put it be a deficit of pretty close to $6 million for the town if this went in. And these are, well, whatever. I took a crack at it. Some other things, I did what the population would be at 10%. If we only went to 10% versus 25%, it's nominal, as you can imagine. I don't necessarily need to go through this.
That's the other slide.
What?
Is that slide right there?
Yeah.
And what is that, broken out with the same?
Same scenario.
Same
That's a
scenarios?
10%.
Yeah, I just said if we were at 10%, so you can see the comparison, how many extra students. And cost increases would be anywhere from $500,000 to 1.3, depending on whatever the scenario was. I thought it was important to talk about parking issues, because state average is 1.5. Milton's average is 2 cars per household. So additional new cars would be anywhere from 2,500 to 3,400. It's going to be somewhere in that range for these houses. I don't know what it is, but it's a lot. And average car length is 14.7. So if you want to put it on think of it this way, it's 25,000 square feet extra on the road, or going in and out of Milton every day to be 85 football fields of cars, if you want to think of it like that. Put it in that scenario. Extra cars on the road. If you use your car every day, that's how many extra it would be. Significant. I think is significant. And I just wanted to talk about a couple other items regarding the MBTA Communities Act. I tagged this on. Is towns, these are towns that file suit against the state for having to comply. And what I did was land square miles. I took the land square miles, how many acres it is, what the population was in 2020. I got this from the census. And like Milton has 1.3 people per acre. Every town except for Marshfield was below us. These towns are all suing because of this act. They're at 10%, 15, 10, 10, 15, and 10%. And we're at 25. So to me, it seems, yep.
So Brian, I'm just looking at some of the towns, like Rentham, so Middleborough, for example, they're classified as a commuter rail.
Yeah, they're
So
15.
so there's a different category, and then Rentham
Yep.
is categorized as. Adjacent, so yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm
They're
just saying, so
15.
it's a different category, so there's a different percentage, so.
I have a,
I know, so I think that it's difficult to compare Milton to those towns that are not similarly situated as ours.
Yeah.
And they're in different categories.
well, that's the point.
I know, so, but but
Like,
they.
why are we at 25? They're fighting it, and they're at much
Right.
less than us.
I know, but I think there are different types of communities based on how they're categorized.
Right, Rentham is adjacent, Middleborough's commuter.
Right, so you have it up there, yeah. you
Yeah.
have to- So I just, anyway, that was just my point.
In Middleborough, they did settle with the state, their suit. They settled.
Do you know what the settlement?
Brian,
Yes?
Brian, they settled with the state, and I believe if, you know, my memory is working well tonight, the settlement came about because they had already had a smart growth plan in place and were already employing that plan into development. So the MBTA law and their smart growth plan were a match. So because they, in essence, had a smart growth plan, which was the same as what the MBTA would have been, the team made that settlement and gave them an exemption because in essence, they already had a T plan employed. Now, I'm pretty sure, I don't have that document in front of me at the moment, and I don't know where to find it on my computer.
I trust you.
But that's how I understood it. It had to do with a certified bylaw in their town for a smart growth plan, which I don't believe the other towns mentioned have. So just knowing about that one town. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess my point on this is like, there's a fairness issue to me, like on some of these towns. But anyways. And this was mentioned already, but I'll bring it up again. My last slide is just about Lexington. You know, they voted, my wife is from Lexington, a very progressive town. And they were all about this, and they voted, they went all in. They said, we're gonna do much more than we need to do. And they did multifamily housing, 227 acres, and they only had to do 50 acres. And it passed town meeting, 63% support. By the end of 2024, they had 10 applications, 1,100 new multifamily zoning, and they were freaking out how fast it was going up. And a citizens petition, petition, I don't know for what type of petition it was, I'm sorry. But there was a petition, and they scaled it back from 227 to 90, and it passed with 94% of the vote at the next town meeting. And they all applauded after it went through, like how fast it was. They were told it was gonna be, happen over years, and it didn't happen. It was fast. And that would be my fear.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian or comments? Ron?
This is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
A lot of analysis, and I think you're presenting it very fairly. Do you know if anyone looked at, so if I keep it really simple, you take a big house, and you chop it into three, right? So you had one family there, now you have three families. That one family that had the whole house, I would think had more chance of having kids. When you chop it into three, assuming it's the same footprint and same square footage and everything, then you have three smaller families. Did anyone talk about the impact of that bigger family, the original owners, probably wouldn't be there at some point? Because now it's a 3-unit. Because I would think that would bring down the numbers a little bit.
Well, they do say, I don't know, but the smaller the unit, the less likely it is to have kids. For some reason. But the bigger the apartment thing, the more likely it is to have That's a national and a state.
Because they'd say that to my parents, smaller the place, less kids.
Yeah, I grew up in an
know.
apartment, so there's three of us.
Good. Oh, yeah. Jay?
Can you go back to the RKG saying how many kids per apartment? Because I'm just looking at their, what I think is their final presentation.
I don't think they did say how many per apartment. I did.
Oh, okay.
They never did.
Yeah, things like this.
This was from me. I pulled this off the internet.
Oh, okay.
And I have the backup on this, which I probably should share with everybody.
Thank you. Like to. Peter, you look at these? You looked at these, didn't you?
Yeah, I've got
Yeah.
similar but different stuff.
So I mean, that's my fear. And I know this is, very contentious issue, and it's, shouldn't be. But there is a cost to this. There's going to be a cost to this.
Sorry.
That's probably the essence of this that I think that you're going to have.
Any? Peter?
And this is really the first financial analysis we've seen. We're talking about space and we're talking about families and housing issues, but nobody's put a cost to it. We just had a 9.5% override. We're looking at a new school. And the town is going to have to deal with this addition. Now, when you do the 25 and Brian does the 10, I'm sorry, the 10%, those numbers are in proportion. It's just something, somebody ought to be bringing that up, and I'm glad that Brian made the analysis and made that happen.
Can I just counter that? So there's going to be cost no matter what. So if you do this 10%, and we're all surmising the growth in terms of schools, parking, et cetera. If you're non-compliant, the Attorney General's office issued a very stringent mandate saying, and it's on page 2 because I pulled it up and printed it out, that they will enforce Section 3. They will enforce these regulations. So if you have, again, we're conjecturing about possibly $6 million, right, in an additional community with schools and capital costs. If we're not in compliant by July 14th and we have a 10% plan, the Attorney General's office will seek enforcement. And when they seek enforcement, and I used to work in the Attorney General's office, and they will be aggressive about it because I certainly was. They will seek enforcement and it will be litigation in the courts. And I don't think that we can hire someone pro bono to represent us because possibly, in my opinion, could be a conflict of interest there. So you have to hire outside counsel, not just town counsel, but someone who specializes in litigation. And it could go through the courts, it could exhaust the appellate remedies. It could cost a lot of money. So it's, either way, it's gonna cost. It's gonna cost. That's just the bottom line. Maybe not 6 million, but I can guarantee you it'll be maybe several million for legal fees and maybe even fines. I haven't looked at the statute closely enough, but usually when there's civil remedies involved, there are fines that they can fine the town. I don't know whether they can or not. I didn't read through everything carefully, but possibly. It could just be a lot of cost. So again, as an attorney, I'm the black letter type of law person. It's what I do every day, and I just see it as the law, and it's not discretionary. Although, like I said, the 10%, yeah, when you're doing the cost analysis, it sounds beneficial to the town, but I think at the end, what are the benefits, right? The benefits are, at the 25% is, we're following the law, we're not spending town resources and money on fighting something that's clearly spelled out in the regulations in the statute. And it also speaks to me personally of a town that's scared of change. For those for 10%, they're scared of communities moving in to take advantage of this affordable housing. And I'm not saying that you are, Peter, by any means, or anyone here. I'm just saying that when I think about affordable housing, I think of my son who, and my daughter who just graduated from college last week, that, the job market's horrible now. And she's gonna probably live at home for a while. And a lot of kids, not even just my children, but a lot of kids who are in their mid-20s, they can't afford to like buy a house because the market's crazy. They can't afford to rent. So those are the type of communities that I'm also envisioning, not people necessarily bringing in with children and supposedly flooding our schools. That's how I look at it. So I think I look at it as the 25% as almost enriching our community in many wonderful ways. It's scary because we don't quite know what's going to happen down the road. I mean, like Lexington, like you mentioned, but it's, we are a growing population, not just in this state, but just throughout the East and West Coast. And it's just something that we have to do. And whether it's fair or not, whether we want to or not, it's spelled out, in my opinion, very clearly in the law. So, and failing to comply with it will cost us too. That's my little 2 cents. So I'm not saying anybody means that people who are supporting is 10%. So that's just my view as a lawyer about it. So.
I also think, Macy, that it's hard to quantify the funds, grant funding we won't have access to.
That's another point.
And I know, some people are arguing, oh, well, we never had that money, so we didn't lose it. But we won't ever have that money, and that's a real cost as well. And to the point about Lexington was able to make those changes because they maintained control over their zoning by remaining compliant. I think, Brian, thank you for this. I view this as kind of like back of the envelope to some degree, because you haven't assumed the build out of any studio apartments or any one-bedroom apartments in this. And your analysis assumes that, 527 students show up day one, whereas to sort of Kyle's presentation earlier, we know that the build out of these units is going to be much more gradual than that. So I don't think that these are hard and fast numbers that and I don't know that you meant them to be, but just want to push back.
Right. And just to add to the zoning part, I mean, if you want to change, let's say I want to change my home right now, I'm in precinct 2 to a 2-family. I have to go through the planning board, I have to get permits, there's a process, so I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I mean, just trying to, refinish my basement would require, just getting permits and, things like that.
Well, once it's zoned, they have it by right. They can build by
They
right.
do, of course, but you still have to
As long as they have to buy the property.
Right, but I still have to go through structural
They have to do
approvals.
that.
Right, so it's by right, because it's your property, but there's still procedures and processes that one must go through. So I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing, or maybe even a 6-month thing. I mean, I'm just thinking about, right, just refinishing a basement takes like a good 6 to 8 months, maybe even a year.
Just doing your basement.
You can't find anyone to do it. That's another thing. Can't find anyone to do anything anymore. So, but
Allison and Peter.
Thanks very much for the presentation. I think, the financial is one important factor that I think needs to be taken into consideration, especially with the unfunded mandate that it's, I think we really need to dig deep, and I would love some data on the amount of people that actually use the trolley. But I don't think the intended purpose is actually fulfilling the housing. As a young person, you're not going to necessarily live in Milton, which is, intended for the school systems, and it's going to be more so that if somebody was trying to use the schools as a stepping stone into being able to go to a house at one day. I mean, young people, if you're serving the purpose, Boston's not mandating this, but ideally that would be where young people would want to live. And cost-wise, it's not applicable. And also understanding that this will not be a financial, low cost, even if it is developed. So because of our rising real estate numbers. So, developers will look at this as opportunities to capitalize on the real estate market as much as possible. So the meaning of the need of the housing for young people, to be able to afford to live here does not necessarily meet this with the housing situation. So just, things to point out because financially, I've got to see, what would be a reasonable market price if they were to develop these 3 units. I know that there was a 2 unit and they were over $1 million each for a multi. So that just says a lot about where Milton will continue to stay in the housing. And so I just wanted to point that out as a big important factor in the financial funding that this mandate will cost the town and has yet to be dug into. So I think that those are key points, for us to take into factor, especially with the, the grants have been discussed and those are discretionary, but some of those that I did look into weren't open for us to apply. There's a grant on that list, and there's 2 that, yes, we wouldn't qualify, but it's not open for us to apply for it anyways. So I think it's, we're using all these things to show, but, I think it's important to be transparent. And nobody's really talked about the cost that it does cost us to have the MBTA transit, the 2 million. So, I think that with the amount of people, I think that that's always important to see if it's justifiable for us with this. So just things to point out to the group. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the work.
Peter.
Yeah, just a point, Macy, I do appreciate that. This is not anti-housing. This is the cost to the town, given, again, an override, and that not all of the town members have children in the schools or, are going to, who'd like to stay here. There is a cost, and it's an every year cost, which is going to go up by at least 2.5%. Going forward, and that eventually school children, regardless of the number, will dictate another school building, which will have capital costs, and there are no capital costs. My concern is financial. It's that the roadmap has to have the numbers, and I hadn't seen any in any of the conversations that we've had until tonight, and from almost anybody, including the bodies that have come before us. There's no numbers. If there's no numbers, it's free, and we know it's not free. So that's the issue, and it's a recurring expense every year. I just want people to understand that. They have the right to understand that, and they should have that information.
Can I respond to that quickly? So I'll propose that everything has a cost, and when there's a law, which we have here, and I don't think there's a defense in court to say, well, I'm not going to follow the law because it costs too much or it's unfair. That rarely ever passes muster in court. And because a lot of laws are unfair. I think a lot of what's going on right now is really unfair. But, I don't think you can challenge it and say, well, I'm not going to comply. We'll partially comply because it's going to cost us. So I understand, and I totally understand, and Brian did an excellent job presenting this, and I agree with you, but it comes down to balancing, what are the costs are you willing to give up? The cost of non-compliance, or I think Julie mentioned, the cost of losing funding and things that we could have. So just, anyway.
I'm agreeing with that. There are, however, cases pending, and why wouldn't we not wait for those, or in this case, an injunction been filed to basically wait until it's adjudicated? I know we have a June 16th town meeting on a July date.
14th,
We can't change the town meeting? We can't wait until, there should be, and there could be, and I'm hoping that there is, and I would jump on the 25% bandwagon if I knew that that was our only option, and I would want that done, absolutely, by the deadline, and then we're off to the races. But where there's a question, and where this could cost the town less, and have us be in compliance as a commuter rail adjacent community, which is what we are, you know, the question about Everett, we're not going to ask for MBTA funds to run a train down Center Street. It's just not, it's not who we are. So,
My understanding is the litigation pending in Plymouth Superior Court, it's not about the percentage, it's about
The unfunded mandate.
yeah, unfunded mandate.
yeah.
So it's not necessarily, so I don't think from, and anyone, please correct me because I'm unfamiliar with what's pending in Plymouth Superior Court, but the issue is not a 10% versus 25%. That's well established in the regulations. It's 25%. So nobody seems to be challenging that. It's the unfunded mandate. But that doesn't excuse the town from having to comply with the recently promulgated regulations. Am I correct in that? Am I? Right? So to me, it's like, so you're kind of kicking the can down a road in hopes that the town can get away, not get away, but like have a 10% plan versus a 25%. But that doesn't seem to be a feasible option in the future. It seems to me that 25% is we're stuck with it.
Well, and
Right, am I-
anything that comes of any legal case will not be dependent on, they're not going to say, oh, Milton's already zoned for 25%, so forget it. If a court rules that we actually should be reclassified, we can walk back our 25% compliant plan and do less.
I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but will we, so that's what I'm kicking around in my head.
This reclassification?
Yeah. Say we do 25%, and then, like, we're talking vacuum here. They say unfunded mandate. Milton, you're due sewer money, or whatever, or towns, you're due this, and whatever analysis they do. Does the town of Milton walk it back? Does our town meeting walk it back?
Unfunded mandate wouldn't.
No,
it would still be
well,
25.
okay, so I'm kind of
Yeah, I
conflating
don't
several
think it-
things. But, I mean, if we had the opportunity to walk it back, for whatever reason, unfunded mandate, they make some other ruling, would we do that, you think?
Do you mean, do I think town meeting would vote to do that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But we would have the freedom to.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a lot of the concern that's going on, is like, what happens if we vote yay, nay? Does it come back?
'Cause it-
Town council, I want everybody to know, has not opined on this yet.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, if you're pulling the 10%, I mean, you're not, I mean, to me, it's a demonstration by the town of not acting in good faith. When the law is so clear, like, it's so clear to me, I just don't see that there's any discretion to go beyond that. And so you're proposing Article 5, which is the 10%, and let's just say it passes and 6 doesn't, right? And 10% goes in, and the AG's, I mean, so I think that we have a better chance, right? If we go with the 25%, walk it back if we have to later on, at least as a demonstration to the Attorney General's office and the state that, look, the town of Milton is acting in good faith and following Section 3 and its promulgated regulations, and we'd like to walk it back. Whereas 10%, to me, yeah, we're gonna lose control, and it's not an act of good faith at all. I mean, that's,
Just so everybody knows, this was, the lawsuit was filed in the Norfolk Superior Court, and it's being transferred to Plymouth. The docket is 25A2CV00586, is filed in Norfolk County. And it's going to go down to a judge who has a collective group of lawsuits already pending. And there's a next date on that, I think, next week. So that's just information. For
Yeah,
everybody.
and one of the arguments is the designation as a rapid transit community.
Yeah, and they bring that up, but they've joined the other mandate, unfunded mandate people. So that's just information about that. Brian, we should try to have a few more questions, wrap it up, and then we had
Just
hear from Jay.
for Allison, these are the Milton stops you wanted. I actually pulled a lot of data, I was digging into this, on daily weekday boardings I had, according to the MBTA in Milton. So these four are Milton, Central Ave, Valley Road, and Capon, right? Those are all Milton stops, so it's 780 average weekday boardings. I think that's per day, 780.
This is
Are you still there?
2023.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
hear you.
Okay.
That seems, that's from 2023.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how that's changed, or, because, as somebody who's in P2, I mean, I think Capon, in like all of Central, I don't think they see 500 in a day. And to be honest, but
Yeah.
that's just as somebody who's been on there. But yeah, I mean, if that's what it says. but
You know
I
what, I'll
really
see if
don't.
there's more current data.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Brian, doesn't that
And the one
also
thing-
consider?
And the one thing that I do want to point out is the process of, if we did do 25%, it'd have to go back to town meeting, correct, and then they'd have to vote. It wouldn't be like a town-wide decision to change it. I think the process, would be lengthy and not, just as simple as like, as many said, oh, like, I'm just, somebody could tell me different, but it wouldn't be something very easily changed. And if town meeting, certain way that it votes, it might not be as, the town might want it, but the town meeting members might not want it. I don't know, just something to think about.
Yeah, just a,
Can I also add that, do you think those numbers, so the pandemic, the public health emergency ended in 2023. And so the fall of 2018, that's pre-pandemic. So most people were teleworking or working a hybrid schedule. So do you think that would affect some of the usage of
they said it
public
went down
transportation?
significantly after
Because,
COVID.
yeah, because after.
Like
COVID.
everywhere, it still is
Right,
down.
because most people are teleworking, they're working in a hybrid schedule.
These were numbers I think presented at the select board at one point.
Okay.
Because I think when this was kind of an issue regarding classification and it was cited the low numbers. Can't believe.
Yeah, it's just a
even the Boston
consideration.
stations how low they are,
Just to Allison's point, it is really hard to change zoning, and I've done it in other towns too, it doesn't matter where, but it's always a challenge. And once it's zoned for something, like if you did get 25% of the people, developers buy it up, you're stuck at that point. You can't go back. You can't take it away once it's out there.
Does anybody have any more questions for Brian or anything regarding his presentation?
Nice
So,
job.
yeah, Judy.
Tom?
Yeah.
It's not for Brian, but, so I'm kind of in the middle. Jay, I'm sorry that I'm delaying you by a second here.
Not a problem.
But I think it was Andrew who mentioned about town meeting members and, it appeared to me he was saying he was disappointed there wasn't more outreach between the residents that town meeting members are representing. I was going to say something earlier, but to Andrew's point, I've lived in the precinct I'm in for 41 years. It's kind of a long time to never have any town meeting member reach out to me about anything. Except when there's these, oh, can you sign a petition? Can you vote yes on, orange trees in every yard? Whatever, that's the only time, is when they need something, is my perspective. And as an example, once I left a very nice, polite message for a town meeting member. Could you please get back to me? I would like to talk to you about the orange trees in everyone's front yard. I would really like to discuss this. Zip, nada, nothing on my phone in report. So, I just wanted to add that. I was going to say something and I decided to sort of sleep on it. And I'm awake now. Made my decision to just make that point that I have heard that if you are in a neighborhood, your own little neighborhood, a couple of streets, and you happen to know 3 town meeting members because you all carpool to the school or something, of course there's conversation. But I do believe there are citizens in our town that are not in that loop of conversation. And thank you, Jay, for letting me wake up and have my coffee before your presentation. I appreciate that.
Judy, I appreciate that comment, and now you've created another comment. Ron wants
I'll
to
make it
comment.
quick. We have so much that we decide that are really important. I caution we may not like the town, the form of government we have in town, but it is what it is. You don't like your town rep, town meeting member, vote for someone else. I would just hope we can focus on the issue at hand about the planning articles. And then if we want to complain about structures and who's getting elected and agree with their votes or not, that's something we can talk about next month.
I don't know, that's more fun, Ron. But I appreciate that comment.
I know, Ron, let's talk about you then.
And all that being said, Jay has some slides for our consideration in terms of these issues.
Okay.
So
Jay,
I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to say my slides do cover similar topics to what Brian presented, and I very much appreciate what Brian did present. He and I are looking at this from two different directions. Yep. We're taking two different approaches to this, and I think it can only be better by having these two different approaches in front of the Warrant Committee to help us consider what's going on. I will say I am going to go through my slides sort of as I planned them. If I'm not responding to something Brian said, it's not because I didn't hear him, it's just because I'm going to stick with my notes. But I appreciate that Brian and I both got to present tonight also. That way, everyone in the Warrant Committee can sort of mull over both of them over the next 2 days and see why we're similar and why we're different and see what we think about it. So with all that said, I will share my screen. Okay, slideshow. All right, this is...
Maximize that, Jay.
Yes. This is also about the financial impact of the MBTA plan. I did a look at the financial impact a year ago in November, so a year and a half ago, and thought it was worth revisiting what I did then with the new plan and with some of the new questions that came up last week. So I want to get rid of this stupid thing is in front of my screen. Whatever. I want to be clear. First of all, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Warrant Committee. All of you in this room know this. I'm speaking to the Warrant Committee. I'm only speaking on behalf of myself. I'm building on the prior work that I presented a year and a half ago. I'm not going to go into all the detail that I did at that time. I'll just brush on it. That presentation, I'll try to ask Karen to send it around to all of you so you can see some of the more underlying detail, but you don't need me to say it again. The goal of this is not intended to advocate for any specific outcome. It's just to let people on the Warrant Committee and throughout town make a more informed decision with what we're approaching. And this forecast about the future is going to need to make assumptions. There's no way around that. I'm trying to be crystal clear in stating my assumptions, both in this presentation or referring back to the last one, so you can see how I'm getting to the result I have and adjust it if you disagree. So what is this I'm about to show you? It's a high-level forecast. What does that mean and what does it not mean? What I hope it answers is, will this blow a big hole in the budget? And what it can't answer is exactly how much will this cost? It's just a big picture. And I would like to say, I said this a month or two ago in a presentation, I'm saying it again, I'm an actuary, and the Society of Actuaries motto is substitute facts for impressions. So we've all got certain impressions with what's going to happen with this MBTA Communities Act. I heard people say last week, there is no way that new developments will generate enough tax revenue to pay for themselves. That's an impression. I understand why people have that impression. Or people say this will lead to so many kids that the schools will be overcrowded. These are reasonable concerns to have. They're reasonable concerns and they deserve examination. So I want to take these concerns and put some numbers around them so we see where they lead. At the bottom you hear you may have heard this phrase, all models are wrong, but some are useful. What I want to do is get rid of the nihilism, get rid of the idea that, well, we can't predict the future, so let's not even try. Let's just give up and say, there's nothing we can do, we don't know what's going to happen. We just want to make the best estimate. And we've got 2 estimates before you tonight, so hopefully they'll help to lead us to the truth. A bit more of what I looked at a year and a half ago. Stick with my notes. So in 2023, I took the results from the consultant and I scrutinized them against Milton's budget. One way that I agree with the previous speaker is that I thought the analysis from the consultant was a bit incomplete. So I looked at their analysis and I looked at their per pupil costs and their town costs, and I thought they weren't high enough. I dug into them, and you can look at the details of my previous presentation, and I got school costs that were over 60% higher than what the consultant estimated, and I got town costs that were 1/3 higher than what the consultant estimated. I did that because I thought that was the best. I thought they were giving me a good foundation, but I improved it based on what I knew of Milton's budget. And the big factors that were driving me last time, and still are, is two conclusions that I had last time. One is that most apartments that are expected to be built under this will be 2-bedroom apartments or smaller. And the second one, the first point is there will be 2 bedrooms or smaller. And the first point also is
Sorry,
that 2-bedroom apartments don't contribute many students to Milton schools. And I'll go into these in a little bit more detail. So an analysis that we did last time, that I did last time, of how many apartments in Milton. Sorry, I looked at apartments in Milton, apartments that were proposed, apartments that exist, and then also what the consultant suggested. And it looked like less than 10% of them were going to be new 3-bedroom apartments. In general, I estimated about 5% of these new apartments would be 3-bedroom. And based on the data RKG had, and based on what we can see from current apartments in Milton, I'm ending up with 0.08 kids in each apartment going to the public schools. And if you look at, I've got 4 units listed down at the bottom: 36 Central, 50 Elliott, 36 Elliott, and 88 Wharf. If you put those together, 160 units about, and 9 kids. So that's about what my estimate is. My estimate is 0.08 kids per apartment. In reality, if we look at some apartment units in town, we get a little bit less than that. Okay. But then I had to scratch out my bottom box. My bottom box said, I did this analysis 19 months ago, and since then nobody else has done any competing analysis. That's not true. Thank you, Brian. So, moving on. I updated the analysis from 18 months ago. What did I update? Well, first of all, I just updated the list of locations from last time to this time. We've got a new 10% plan and a new 25% plan. I added the impact of retirees emptying their houses to be occupied by families. We talked about that a bit earlier tonight. We talked about that a bit last week. I want to do some analysis around, okay, what are we really going to see from that? There'll be much more on that in coming slides. And I took another look at the triplexes. One of our members just mentioned something a minute ago about what happens when one family moves out and turns it into a triplex. I took a look at that. What I did not update was any of the financials. Tax rates, property values, town expenses. That would have been a tremendous amount of work to take the 2023 numbers and make them current year, and I think led to very little change. The results I have should be conservative because with the override, our taxes have gone up more than our expenses over the past 2 years. So I'm fine sticking with the numbers from 2 years ago. All right, let's look at what I think are going to happen from apartments. When I say apartments, I'm not distinguishing between condos and rentals. I'm talking about a big building with lots of units in it. Based on the work I had before, the property tax, based on, and I'm looking at 50 Elliott Street as sort of a typical apartment unit in town. Property tax about $4,000. Got a few more sources of revenue in here. Municipal cost per unit, calculated about $1,400. And then we can see on the right, I have a little bit more information on where this 0.08 number of kids per apartment comes from. RKG had these numbers of saying a 1-bedroom apartment usually has 0 kids. A 2-bedroom apartment is expected to have 0.05 kids. 3-bedroom apartment is expected to have about 1 kid. And smush all those together with probabilities. If we think the 3-bedroom apartments will be about 5% of what we have, we get to about 0.08 kids per apartment. Put all that together.
Can I stop for a second?
Yes, please.
That doesn't add to 100%, 25, 8.
Does it not? Oh, boy.
You're missing 10%.
Yeah, okay. First flaw found, thank you.
That number of kid figure is really surprising.
Yeah, and that's what, well, again, that's what we're seeing in town. When I saw that from RKG of really 2-bedroom apartments only have 0.05 kids per.
Yeah, so that was the 3.8? Was the 3-bedroom 0.8 or was it 2-bedroom, Jay? I'm sorry.
Well, it's an average.
No, I'm saying the
the
average of all the
the
apartments
average.
is 0.8.
It's
And then
0.8.
very few of them will be 3-bedroom.
Okay.
0.08, yeah. So, yeah, as a sanity check, that's why I wanted to look at these apartment buildings in town. 4 different apartment buildings, 160 units, And that's what we're actually seeing in reality, is very few school kids in these apartments. So, yeah, I started with what the experts had, but then checked it against our reality.
Can I ask you a question about your definition of apartment? I know you said it means a unit in a large building. But does that, is like a two-family an apartment?
No, I deal with those separately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I agree. It's surprising how small that number is, but it fits with our reality of what we're seeing in our current apartments, condos in town.
It's like shocking to me because when I think about why I moved to town, because I had kids and it was a good school system, proximity to Boston.
You probably bought a single
But did you
family.
move to an apartment?
If I didn't have the money for a home, I would have.
But there aren't many apartments to move to in.
Not yet.
That,
Not
I mean,
yet.
what you're saying makes sense, but it's not what we see in the real estate market.
And
Yeah,
keep going.
Yeah, I agree.
It's so counterintuitive. I have a
Yeah,
hard time
it is.
believing it.
I agree.
I don't find it counterintuitive.
I don't know. When I first saw this from Jay, I was like, what? That has to be wrong.
But people do, I mean,
You know,
Boston, I
but-
know Boston is different, but we are close to Boston. I mean, there are a lot of young families in South Boston and South End.
Yeah.
See, when I
But
was
it's
in my
1 out of
triple
20,
decker,
right? So it's
I
1 out of
no
20
kids.
two-bedroom
Yeah,
apartments has a
JP.
kid.
Rossi, I mean, I'm just thinking like just,
I sense everybody had their first child in an apartment.
Yeah, we
Then
moved out of our two-bedroom when I was pregnant with our second.
And I will say that, RKG said that 3-bedroom apartments have 1 kid per 3-bedroom apartment, but, and again, I went into this last time and can share it with you again, we're not seeing a whole lot of 3-bedroom apartments. The 40Bs have to build a minimum of 10% 3 bedrooms, and all the new 40Bs have exactly 10%. They build as few as they can. And other market rate units that are going in have no 3 bedrooms. So.
And the other thing I think about is the interest rate environment.
The
Interest rate environment is like different purchasing a home now as opposed to wanting to rent. So anyway.
Yeah.
But
okay.
So perhaps the 3-bedroom should be 15%? Is that, I mean, 10% has to go.
It's definitely 5%. I don't know. 3-bedroom is definitely 5%. I don't know where I messed up on the
Based
others.
what there is now, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I just make a point? Like, 88 Wharf is like half of all the apartments,
Okay.
multifamily in the town, 79. And that's all high-end condos, they're like 1.5 million.
Okay.
And most of them, I think, most of them, from what I've seen, are older people, retirees, some of them. So they don't have kids, and they probably don't need 2 apartments. So that's skewing the number. The problem is, with the data in Milton that I found, was that there's only 3 data sets, and it's not that much.
I hear what you're saying, but I disagree that it's skewing the numbers, because if that's what developers want to build in Milton, if a developer wants to build a high-end apartment complex and they can sell it for a lot of money, then they will. And that's what they have been doing so far.
You think that'd be the majority of what developers would build?
I can't predict the future, but I just know that's what they've been building so far. So
We're replacing,
I think
were we replacing, or what with what? Impressions with?
replacing
Facts with impressions.
facts with impressions.
Facts with impressions.
impressions
Well,
with
replacing
impressions with
impressions.
facts.
One of those.
Yikes.
Substitute
11
facts for impressions.
Substitute
That's what
facts
it
for
is.
impressions, there we go.
Okay. So everybody absorb this. I'm going to move on to, this is what it was mentioned earlier tonight. It was mentioned when the planning board came to visit us. And it's been mentioned, I've heard it mentioned at the planning board lots of times, is that there will be the second order effect, the empty nester syndrome. We're going to build new apartments, and Milton retirees will move out of their single family house and into those apartments. And, looking at my notes. And then when they move out of their house into those Milton apartments, then families will move from Boston, bringing their children with them, or not bringing their children with them. Let's say they bring their children with them, and then we'll have more children in the schools. This is a very plausible scenario, and I think it deserves rigorous examination. But I do want to point out that the first step that I have here in purple is critical to this. For this to be valid, we have to have retirees who will move out of their house into an apartment in Milton that would not have otherwise moved out of their house into an apartment. If they would have been willing to move out of their house into an apartment in Quincy or Dorchester or Canton, then the fact that they're moving into an apartment in Milton doesn't really increase the housing turnover. It's only if they would have only considered moving into an apartment if they could stay in the town of Milton. So that's the setup for what we're looking at. So now we need to look at some assumptions. First of all, how many of these new units will be occupied by seniors that are move out of their Milton homes into an apartment? I looked at 88 Wharf. It's a big building. It's got 101 registered voters living there, and of those, and it was built in 2003. So I looked at how many of these residents are over 65 and registered to vote in Milton before 2003. That tells me that they lived here before 88 Wharf was born. It also tells me they've lived here over 20 years. They're longtime people. So likely moved out of a house. Got 27. 27 divided by 101 gives you about 27%. So that told me, okay, I'm going to say 27% of these units will go to Milton seniors who are moving out of their house into this apartment. Okay. The next assumption is a big one. It's the one I was talking about a minute ago. If seniors move from a Milton house to a Milton apartment, would they have been willing to move to an apartment in Quincy, for example? If they would have been willing to move to Quincy, but they're just moving to Milton because it's there, the fact that there's a Milton apartment is not motivating them to move out. It has to be they would not leave their house at all unless there was an apartment in the town of Milton. Now, what percentage of seniors that are moving into a retirement apartment fall into this category? They will only move into an apartment that's in Milton. I don't know. I don't know of any way to guess that. We've got to just make a swag. I feel safe saying it's below 50%. I feel safe saying it's not zero. To pick a number for discussion purposes, I'm going to say 25%. 25% of retirees moving into an apartment would only do it if it's in the town of Milton. They would not cross the river to go to the Walter Baker Chocolate Factory. The other 75 would take what they can get. And then a third assumption we need is the empty nesters move out, a family moves in. How many kids are added to the school when a family moves into the house? Well, I could start by saying the average house in Milton has about half a public school kid per household. 9,000 households, 4,500 students. That feels a little too low for what we're talking about. So let's look at Woodlot Drive.
0.9.
Oh,
0.9.
What's 0.9?
The average, I'm sorry, never mind.
Okay. Woodlot Drive maybe is a better example because they're all new houses. And we learned just the other night that 17 school kids and 24 houses, that's about 3/4. But I'm going to use a round number. I'm going to say one. I'm going to say one school kid per household. And you might be thinking, that sounds low. I don't know many houses with one school kid. Keep in mind, people don't necessarily move to town the day their kid starts kindergarten and move out the day their kid graduates high school. If somebody moves to Milton the day their first kid is born, and they move out and they have 2 kids, and they move out of Milton the day their first kid turns 26, they lived here 26 years, had 2 kids in the schools, 13 years each, that's 1. So I think 1 is a reasonable number. Let's put all these together. So if an apartment opens up, 27% of those apartments are filled by Milton empty nesters. 1/4 of them would have stayed in their house except for these Milton apartments. They're going to open up a house that leaves room for 1 kid. So that tells me with this second order effect, the empty nester syndrome, 7%. 0.0 for every apartment that opens up. That adds 0.07 kids to the schools somewhere else in town. At $15,800 per kid, that's a little over $1,000 in school cost for every apartment that opens based on the empty nester effect. So now, I didn't get to the end earlier. The earlier slide showed, okay, each apartment with the taxes and the costs gets to, I guess it was about $1,500. But now, when we have the second order school cost, that cost added in gets us down to a benefit of $567 per apartment that opens up.
So the town is making money.
That's what my numbers show. Yeah.
Jay, can I just ask a question? Where did you get the property tax number?
Okay, I assumed it has the same value as 50 Elliott Street, I think. 50 Elliott Street. That was, when I looked at several units, that was sort of the median.
Yeah.
And they're paying about $4,000 a year in property tax.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, the property tax versus the municipal cost and the school cost ends up with a slight positive number. So what's the full build-out analysis? If you suffered through my presentation 18 months ago, I had all these probabilities of, oh, this one is 50% likely to be built, and this one is 25% likely to be built. Ignore all of that. I'm just saying, that's too much work. What if they're all built? We can argue about if they're all going to be built or not, but let's just look at that for the town. Granite Ave North, Milton Station East, I'm taking the number of net new units, which Ms. Tagayas from the planning board provided me with, and I'm saying, well, 3 of these, East Milton Square, called Randolph West, 711 Randolph, and Mattapan Station, those either have apartment buildings being built right now, or Mattapan Station already has one. I'm assuming those won't be replaced. Every place else, I'm adding the net new units, multiplying it by the cost, and then we've got a couple big negatives. Granite Ave North has a commercial building right there. If it's going to be replaced by an apartment building, we're going to stop collecting taxes on that big commercial building. So that's call it 200,000 that's going away. Milton Station East has extra space storage right there. We're going to build apartment buildings over that. We're going to stop collecting taxes on that. I took out the taxes from extra space storage. Those gave us a negative. So the net impact is that's in thousands. The net impact is a negative of $94,000 per year, is what I'm getting from the apartments. We still have to look at the triplexes. Triplex conversions, or triplex. I'm going to say it both ways. I don't know which one's right.
Triplex, please. I have a bias.
We can vote on that. So I looked at this, and this is a bit different than how I looked at it last time. A single family home, let's say it's converted into 3 units. And I'm just making up. The value of it has to be a little bit more once you convert it into 3 units. I'm just saying, let's say it's 10% more. Made that up. So it's collecting property taxes. And then other revenue, the big one is car tags. I'm assuming that previous is a single family home with 3 cars, 2 cars. Now it's going to be a triplex with 3 cars. Okay. The number of kids. For the number of kids, I assume the single family home started with the average number of kids in Milton, which is a half a kid per house. And then for the triplex, I assumed they're going to be, I have to assume something. I assume they're going to be 3 2-bedroom apartments. Each 2-bedroom apartment has 0.05 kids. And also we've got that second order effects that we talked about a few minutes ago. So that's going to add another 0.07 kids somewhere else in town. Add those together for 3 units, 0.36 kids. The end result is a slight decrease in the number of kids in the town. The municipal cost, I've got the municipal cost tripling. We could debate if having 1 family living in a building versus 3 apartments in that exact same building. Do you need 3 times as many firefighters? You probably don't, but keep it simple. I'm assuming the municipal cost is tripling. The school cost is going down a little bit because we have a few more kids, a few less kids, and the net result is a positive benefit to the town of $700. So now, let's put all these together. Full build out, 25% plan. We've got 876 net new apartments. As I said in the prior page, that's a negative $94,000, mostly due to the lost tax revenue that we used to have from those commercial buildings. The triplex conversions, 225 of them. Ms. Tagayas told me there will be 450 new units. I'm assuming that is 225 single-family homes converted into 3. There may be some nuance there, but that's the big picture. So multiply that by 722 times conversion. You get a total of a positive impact to the town to $68,000. And then how many kids are we talking about? So the new apartments, I think the new apartments will have 70 kids living in them. I think the indirect effect will generate 59 kids throughout the rest of town. And converting the triplexes, as I said, slightly fewer kids when you convert the triplexes, so that reduces it by 32. I think it's going to be a little under 100 more kids in town. Now, we're not just looking at the 25% plan, we're also looking at the 10% plan. So what if we have a full build out of that? The 10% plan is basically the paper mill site, Granite Ave North, and the triplex area. So Granite Ave North, impact, it's a few less apartments, so the numbers are going to be smaller here. We're still losing $198,000 in tax revenue, so that's a negative. Paper mill side is positive. The triplexes are a positive, getting us to a positive 41,000. How many more children in the schools? 28 in those units, 24 more around town. The triplexes bring that down a little bit. Let's compare the two plans. How many new apartments are we going to have? We're going to have 500 more new apartments if they're all built out, comparing 25% to 10%. Skip the next line. Well, more triplexes also. For additional kids in schools, 25% plan gives us 97, 10% plan gives us 44, so that's a difference of 53. It's hard for me to think about 53 more kids in the district, so I think about it per grade, divided by 13 grades. Instead of a 10% plan, which would give us 3 more kids per grade, 25% plan gives us 7 more kids per grade. So we're talking about a difference of 4 kids per grade. And the financial cost or benefit is the 25% plan is, these are small numbers. These are all small numbers compared to the size of the budget. It's a little bit more positive. And as long as we're talking about the net apartment additions, I did want to throw in here where these new apartments will be. About 70 of them will be in Granite Ave North. The bulk of the rest of them will be in that stretch between Milton Station and Central Ave Station, which I think a lot of us think is where the increased apartments should be. That's the trolley. What I didn't consider is capital expenses. Any capital expenses we have that aren't paid for by the builder would be a negative for the town finances. I didn't consider the benefit of having, some of these are mandatory mixed use. We'll have commercial on the bottom floor. That'll be a positive. That's not in my analysis. We provide municipal benefits to current buildings. Did I consider that or not? I don't know. This is left over from last time. Stormwater. I went into water and sewer last time. Stormwater will also be a slight positive. And just when we hired new employees, their salary and health insurance a little bit lower than the average current employee. You would expect nothing less than a full analysis of employee benefits from me. So that's what I have. I'll stop sharing my screen. I'm open to questions.
Did we have any questions for Jay in his presentation and the numbers he presented? Anybody? Anybody at home? Ron.
Thanks, Jay. It is surprising to think that we would make money with all these new units, but I guess I didn't see anything that looks wrong. It feels odd, but I do think a 2-bedroom would less likely have kids than a full house today. That's common sense to me, right? So I guess it makes sense. But it's very different than what Brian presented. Right? I think you have a lot more assumptions that you tried to tackle. That, maybe that's why the numbers play out differently.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to looking at mine and Brian's side by side and thinking about them.
When you rely on 88 Wharf, that's more of a senior facility, right? Or is it age restricted?
It's not age restricted.
No, it's not age, but it is more, I think.
Well, again, my response is that's what the Milton market has. That's what the Milton market is. So
Had in 2003 though.
Well, I'm talking about the people who are. I looked at registered voters right now. Who are they? Oh, but you mean the building itself being built?
The demand then was from 2003. I don't know whether that assumption is correct today or not.
Yeah,
but that's just
don't want to get.
assumption.
I didn't want to get too much into my previous one from 18 months ago, but if I can back that up a little bit.
That's okay.
I'll be brief.
It is not good anymore.
Thanks, Jay.
Right? Is that correct?
20 years.
Got it?
So last time I looked at, so one was the 40B projects, which, as I said, they have a minimum of 10% 3 bedrooms.
Can you maximize that screen?
Yes, let me do that. They have a minimum of 10% 3 bedrooms, and 5 of the 7 of them have the bare minimum 3 bedrooms you can build. So they don't seem to want to build 3 bedrooms. And here are projects that are built or proposed with no 3-bedroom units. No 3-bedroom units at all. I am including the Q in Quincy because it's just across the line. But these are the 4.
That makes sense to me. I feel like if you're interested in 3 bedrooms, you're probably interested in a single-family home versus an apartment.
Yeah, an apartment.
You don't think, I mean, I know some apartments are 2 bedrooms with a den, or 2 bedrooms and an office. Right, because if you don't have a closet, it doesn't count as a bedroom.
Right, you have to have a closet for it to be a bedroom.
I don't know about
I
that.
don't think that's a rule
It's
in
not-
Massachusetts.
It used
I
to
think
be.
it's changed now. I
Because you
don't.
could list your house
Well, I
for,
think that's like a.
you're supposed to have a closet.
I think it's the thought, but I think that now, I don't know, I'm not trying to argue either.
No, I'm just telling.
Because I think I said something and someone was like, no, you can't.
No, I was just thinking like.
Something about the closet, I could be wrong.
Maybe it's not a rule law, maybe, but.
It was, yeah.
When I sold, I mean, like, I remember the real estate agent saying, well, if there's a closet, then it's a bedroom.
Yeah.
If there's no closet, then it's not. So when you try to expand your home, you want to add a closet, so you can say your bedroom. I don't know.
Question for both Jay and Brian. Did your analyses specifically exclude private school kids, or were you just looking at average kids, period?
Yeah.
Good. I'd say a little bit of both. For me, when I was looking at actual in the current apartments we have now, I was looking at public school kids. But when I was leaning on the RKG analysis, I don't know actually. I mean, I don't know.
I didn't consider private school. I mean, initially, the initial RKG was just who were in the public schools. And I just relied on, well, school-age children. This is from the Mass Housing Partnership Study. 2-bedroom apartments in similar buildings, anywhere from 0.18 to 0.23 children per unit, school-age children.
Do we have statistics around what percentage of kids in Milton attend private versus public schools?
We have the Milton Academy numbers, I think.
But then.
But because I think those are instructors living, sending their, I can't even quote. It's a significant number.
My impression, but we don't
But
know
what-
about impressions, is Milton has a high number of
Yeah.
kids who attend private schools.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Especially they opt out usually by 7th grade.
Right, it
so
increases
appears-
significantly starting
yeah,
in
it
middle
goes up.
school.
And it's not just Milton Academy, it's everywhere. It's every school you can, independent school you can think of.
I misunderstood. I was asking. I would agree with that
Yeah.
in terms of private. I thought you meant
I know the numbers
Something in the
on Milton
numbers.
Academy.
instructors
just meant-
sending.
Oh, no, I just meant as the student population of Milton, what percentage of them attend private schools versus the Milton public schools?
Because those numbers can be skewed, because just because you have school-age children doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go to Milton Public Schools.
Anyway, that could be a good data point for us to try to get.
Tom,
Judy.
speaking of that one specific school, Milton Academy, approximately, given any year, 40 to 45 students going to MPS from their staff, and approximately 200 and a little plus most years, students coming that were eligible for MPS to Milton Academy, which is private. So approximately 200 students in our town alone go to that one school.
Thank you, Judy.
From all
Across
different
all age
grades?
levels.
Yes, from all the grades, because they go from K to 12.
Yeah.
So it would be, yes, all 13 grades.
Oh, thank you, Judy.
So is that accurate then to say there are 200 fewer students in the Milton Public Schools in every grade that are at Milton Academy instead?
Yes, that would be correct. And and I know there are a lot of students that go to like Siberian, BC High, just to name two off the top of my head, that I know people in town utilize those schools. So if you take the 200 and then add on, like the Siberian kids, the BC High kids, I think it's a good number of students. I would go as high as 3 if I were to make a guess, adding the Milton and the other private schools that do only service the higher grades at those schools. But you have to understand that there are more upper grade students at Milton Academy than lower school. But that's 200 total throughout the 13 grades.
And as Judy said, that's just Milton Academy. It's not BC High, which is a big, like St. Seb's, Siberian, Belmont
so
Hill,
many, yeah.
BB&M, I mean, you name it, Union Country Day.
Nobles, right, there's so many private schools that, you know, I mean, when you know people around town, they seem to scatter to these schools. It's not just a concentration. But I think the highest number of private school students attend Milton Academy right here in town. Okay, didn't mean to interrupt and, you know, take the conversation in a different direction.
But I think that may help explain your number, Jay, with the, you know, I liked that, you know, there's about 9,000 residents and about 4,500 kids in the schools, and maybe that's why that's lower than some of us feel like it should be.
Ron?
When I think about the two kind of key points from your both very good presentations, Brian, your estimate is about 6 million?
Yes.
I know there are multiple.
School only.
Yep. And Jay says we make money. That's so dramatically different.
Yeah.
And I think you both did good work. So I think what is the big difference? Because I think it's the per kid.
2.
Kids per household. But yeah, what do you think?
One is number of apartments. I put in the full amount build out. That's number one. And you only had 500 apartments being built?
I think I had the full build out.
Did you?
I mean, I didn't have like East Milton, a few others that are already full. But aside from that,
You built everything out.
yeah, I had, how many?
This is the new-
876 net new apartments.
But it's more like, well, it's either 1,400 or 1,700, but it was 1,700, but it's.
Sorry, that's apartments, not counting the triplexes.
Okay.
So,
The number of kids,
Kids per unit.
you know, that's what's radically different. I used what's average in Greater Boston, Massachusetts. And I don't think, there's only 4 data points you used in Milton. I don't think it's representative. I don't think 88 Wharf. You pull out 88 Wharf out of the numbers, which is high-end, $1.5 million condos. That actually doubles the number of average kids in the apartments in Milton, because it's nothing. And that's significant. And there's just not that many places in Milton to draw on. And so what's going to happen when you open up 1,000 new apartments? I think it's going to be more representative of the area. And I don't think they're going to be building $1 million condos here. I think they're going to come in with those double triplex colored buildings and whip them up cheap like they do in most of the things. And I think that's probably what's going to happen, because they don't have to, because it's zoned. They don't have
to do that,
They
you
don't
need to
have
buy-
to
you need to
follow
buy a
like a
property
lot of
that's already
standards that you
expensive.
need.
But you have to be able to afford to
Yeah, you did buy a
spend
unit.
800
That's already going to be $1.5
million
million.
point. Yeah.
Buy a house, a half-acre lot's probably $1 million in this town now.
Sure.
So
Can't find a house
you got to make that money back, right?
Right.
Or rent.
So,
And again, we have existing zoning requirements, so you can't just throw up, you know.
But once it's MBTA, you don't have, the planning board doesn't have control over.
They do.
You have control over standards, like
No,
building
of course,
standards,
yes,
but that's
yeah.
it.
But the zoning itself it's simply because it allows you as a right to have a
Right.
multi-unit dwelling, but you still have to comply with your structural safety requirements.
All that stuff is the same. yeah.
Right.
But you can't say, well, I want a stone face. I want it to look good. I want this or that. You can't say stuff like that in the planning board. That's the whole point of the whole MBTA. They don't want restrictions. They want them
Right.
built.
But has to still pass inspection.
Plus,
You know?
yeah, it has to do that, all that stuff.
Yeah. I've got a chart with more apartments that was shared by the planning department at one point. I know you want me to make it bigger, so I will attempt to. Yeah, so this has, I think it's all the non-age restricted projects in town. 252 units in total and 27 kids, so call it a tenth of a kid per unit. If we scratch out 88 Wharf, that gets us to what, 175 and then still 27? What's 27 over 175? I don't know.
1.5.
Yeah,
How much?
1.7.
not 1.7, 0.17.
0.17.
One, is that?
So,
Oh, do you include,
I mean, I don't think it's valid to exclude 88 Wharf. I think 88 Wharf is a type of project that could be built here. But if you want to exclude 88 Wharf, then it's
No, but it's
27 divided by
it's an outlier, right?
175.
So,
That's 0.15 kids per apartment instead of the 0.8 I had. It's still pretty small.
Do you think the demand for housing is coming from Milton, or is it coming from Boston? And who's coming into the town in these multifamily units? I mean, if you use Milton, then you use, we don't have multi-units here. We got a small sample size, as you would agree to. Wouldn't Boston make more sense?
I think the builder is built to where the money is, and that's going to be richer people. You're not going to bring poor people in. I mean, it's just, they cater to high-end.
Throw that back up.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut off conversation.
Jay, which one is Hendry's? Is that 36 Elliott? Or,
36 Central, is that?
no, the Hendry's Ice Cream?
No.
It's not on
That
there,
probably
yeah.
isn't here because when this was made, it probably wasn't open.
Yeah, that's obviously a,
Yeah, and they have no 3
131
bedrooms.
Elliott, I think it is.
it's a 130, I know it's on Elliott.
Yeah, and they don't have any 3 bedrooms, I
It's a
believe.
transit-oriented development.
No, we
If
don't.
anyone was.
Jay, what number did you use for school children in apartments? What was the denominator?
0.08. Oh, what was the denominator? I didn't really have it.
How many children did you say would be in apartments? Did you have that?
0.08.
0.08? Even with 88 Wharf, this number comes out to 10.7.
0.107. Like 10.7 instead of 8.
Comes out to 10.7.
So
Yeah.
20% higher than what I had?
1.5, yeah, something. And then you pull out 88 Wharf, it's even more, but. So. Then it comes to 15%, which is actually the same exact number. If you take out 88 Wharf, 15% is the exact same number as the rest of the town in houses. Just
As the rest of what?
Town. Like the whole town is 15% of the town. Of the population, 15% of the population of Milton is public school children, just so you know.
Okay.
And that would be the same number. If you pulled out 88 Wharf out of these numbers, that's actually 15% for what it's worth.
But it's not 15% of the number of people.
But this number divided by this number is 10.7, not 0.08. Anyways. And if you took that out, it's 50, and if you took out 88 Wharf, saying it's not representative, then it's 15%.
Okay.
But is it fair to say that children are not living in these 1 or 2 bedroom units? I mean, I think that's the conclusion, right? Regardless of how you divide it, the percentage is not so high as to foreseeably inundate and overwhelm the school system. Right, I mean, so, I mean, that's just what we have existing right now. I mean, is that fair to say that it's a low percentage?
Well, actually, national data, there is a percentage of children that do live in one-room apartments.
Right, but I'm just saying here in
But it's
Milton.
probably low.
Yeah,
It's probably
here-
not-
just
it's
here in
nothing.
Milton. right?
Absolutely.
I mean, Boston, I think would be different.
Yeah.
You know, New York, obviously, it's different, but I'm just saying here in Milton.
Julia?
Right.
Can I ask again, each of you, since you have such different conclusions, how you, tax revenue, what numbers you used, what assumptions you used, how you got there?
I didn't want to argue with RKG's analysis, so I just used their numbers on all the taxes, like the property taxes, what the variable cost was for schools, what the variable cost was for the town. I just used their numbers because I didn't dig into them, assuming they were probably pretty close anyways.
So why was that the one assumption of theirs you didn't want to challenge? Or you challenged all their others?
School children. Well, you could throw, I did throw that number up there if you believed in it. But I think it doesn't agree, well, they told us that they were using a lot of different reasons. They were using Milton data, 4 points in Milton that they said. And one of them was 88 Wharf. And I thought that was fluky. And I think that if you looked at Massachusetts or Greater Boston average, it was more representative of what it would be.
Right, but you didn't do your own research on the tax
No.
revenue? That
I
you
used
just
their
took
number
their
for
word
that.
for it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Can I respond? So,
Well, I will say, I asked them for the data. I never got the backup on it.
I
They really
understand,
came up
but
with
you
it.
went and did your own research on all the other numbers,
Yeah.
but not the tax revenue.
Right.
yeah. I will say, it's been a year and a half. I do remember thinking that RKG's taxes looked low, so this is again from 18 months ago. I took took a smattering of examples, including, I looked at one in Quarry Hills and Quincy, which was just over the line, but figures close enough. Looked at the value per unit of Quarry Hills, 50 Elliott Street, and 36 Central. 50 Elliott Street was the one in the middle, the median. But if you look at these two examples that are actually in Milton, 50 Elliott Street and then 36 Central is about double. So if I'd used 36 Central instead of 50 Elliott Street for the tax revenue, it would have been through the roof. So 50 Elliott Street, each condo is worth about $350,000, gives about $4,000 in taxes each year. So that's what I'm assuming for all these new, again, apartments as opposed to triplexes. That's what I was assuming for taxes.
Thank you.
And for taxes for triplexes, I made it up. I said the average house is $1 million. Let's assume it goes up by 10%. I made it up.
Okay.
Brian, you were just saying 15%, right? In that prior
Yeah.
slide, when you take out 88 Wharf, it's not a percentage, it's kids per unit.
Oh, unit,
Yeah,
right.
so it's
27.
It's 0.15 kids per
sorry.
unit, and Jay's was 0.07 or 0.08.
Yeah, 0.15.
I think
Kids per unit.
The difference
Right,
is
difference number.
Yeah, so it's still a very tiny number, but I think the number you used was like 1 to 2 kids per unit.
So, state average
Yeah.
on two-bedroom apartment is 0.18 to 0.23. And I used the lower number, I used 0.18.
Okay.
So it's close.
Close, yeah.
And you could throw that number in there and use that as an assumption. I could tell you in a minute if you wanted.
But even if you use 0.18, majority of the units being 2-bedroom, there's like still a small number of students that you're adding.
Plus,
It just doesn't make sense.
we shouldn't be that far off because I'm assuming 0.08 kids per unit, but then the indirect, I'm adding another 0.07 kids somewhere else in town. So I should be at about coming back to 0.15 kids per unit, including the ones that live there and including the ones that live elsewhere in town. So we shouldn't be that far off. Maybe it's the revenue this is why I'm so glad Brian and I are both presenting today, and then we can dig through each other's numbers. Yeah, at first glance, I'm assuming 0.15 kids per apartment. Yeah, maybe it's the revenue side. I don't know.
Or that you have such a low occurrence of 3 bedrooms?
Well, it doesn't matter. I'm saying, I'm saying throughout all the apartments, 0.15 kids per apartment. I
Nothing to do.
don't recall. Yeah, that's already assuming a distribution. So I'll be interested in digging into Brian's.
Jay,
Yes.
so I have a curious question. It seems to me, just knowing people in town, that most of the people that are renting are in two-family homes where let's say, the apartment is more like a home, that a little yard or something, and it's not an apartment building. So were you able to extrapolate the difference in, say, rental units, where it's more likely, or from my observation, without digging into any research, the families I know that are renting are in a two-family situation, not an apartment building such as.
Yeah, I think I hear you, and I did wrestle with this a bit. And where I came out is that it looks like, and I'm getting out over my skis here, but it looks like if you convert a house to a triplex, they're going to be about 1,000 square feet per unit. So that's not too big, and it sounds like a two-bedroom to me. So that's why I use the two-bedroom numbers for the number of kids who will live there. I hear what you're saying. It does feel a little bit more like a home. It feels a little bit more like, oh, kids are going to live here. I think if somebody makes it into a duplex instead of a triplex, maybe that's more likely. I know we shouldn't use anecdotal information. I lived in the top floor of a triplex in Newton when we first moved here, and it's pretty small, and I don't know. That's an anecdote. No, not on the topic. So I wrestled with that, because I hear what you're saying. It feels homey living in a triplex. But I think the way we've set it up, they're going to be small. They're going to be 1,000 square feet, maybe less. So that's where I ended up where I did.
Make sense, Judy?
Yeah, it does. I just see, and you know, Jay, that some of the RKG data was when the concentration of units was down in on Granite Avenue, where they had all that space to put up buildings instead of homes that are no longer single family but double family or triple family. And so their analysis was mostly based on that huge concentration of the units down Granite Avenue, which were buildings.
I totally agree with you, and that's why I put a little more work into the triplex work this time than I did 18 months ago, because last time it was what's going on with Granite Ave. That's the 800-pound gorilla, and the triplexes were an afterthought. This time I put a little more work into it.
Okay. Yeah.
Whether I ended up at the right place is an open question.
Yeah, and to that point, we really, in a way, can't, or as I see it, we can't contemplate how many children will be in any of these units. Up by, I think it's Smith Road, they just put up a 20-unit 40B, and I don't see that as attracting a lot of families, a 20-unit building on a 1-acre lot. You know, people with a, couple of kids. Anyway.
Thank you.
Can I quickly show something?
Yes, you can.
You can't read this. It's in the bylaw, but Boston indicators MBTA communities say two-bedroom apartments, 0.25 to 0.3 school-age children per community. Boston Indicators, and 3-bedroom, 0.4. MAPC on 3 bedrooms is the same. National average is 0.29 and 0.72. Massachusetts Housing Partnership is 3-bedroom, 0.54, for 2-bedroom, it's 0.18. So that's where I got all my data. And I used the lowest number and everything, just so there was,
Is it the city of?
conservative. You know, you can't read
Is
that.
this in your presentation?
Yes,
You can send it.
Oh,
You'll
okay.
share.
I'll share it.
Yeah, if you can share it with the whole group individually, or you can send it to me and I can shoot them out. But it'd be great, I think, if everyone here got those.
Sure. I'll send it to you.
And I think they would be all really good for us to take a look at and really think about them. So what we're going to do, if nobody has any further questions for Brian or Jay, I think I'd just like to briefly mention one other article, and then maybe we could take a break. I've posted a meeting for Wednesday, and I'm thinking maybe perhaps we could wrap this warrant up then. Okay? I want to mention Article 2, Lonely Article 2. We're going to have to vote on this Wednesday. I talked to Nick. I'm going to have probably Nick come down. The town already offers these tax exemptions, right? They already offer the exemptions. We're just asking that the elderly, seniors, surviving spouses, seniors and veterans, it's tied to COLA. That's all this is looking. This is statewide. I can have Nick come down. If anybody has any specific questions on the committee as to Article 2, and I know it was really confusing when you look at the statute, send me an email, or send Nick an email and CC me, and let's try to wrap this one up, maybe on Wednesday. Julia.
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but, so the plan Wednesday would be to vote on 2 and 5 and 6.
I'd like to if we can.
Do we know if town council is planning on opining on?
So I received this question earlier today. It's funny, no, he's not ready to opine on it.
But does he plan to at any point before town meeting?
I asked the town administrator that pointed question this afternoon, and I couldn't get an answer. Not because the town administrator, he wants one. It was just the materials were sent to our town council, and we're waiting to hear back. Because I asked that specific question about bringing Mr. Mello in here on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
And I don't think it's gonna really bear any fruit if we have him in here.
Okay.
We'll have maybe town administrator can come in. And he can maybe talk
I
a little
just
bit.
feel like so much is hinging on town council's opinion on this. And if we're not gonna have it in time for a vote,
Well, I know.
who's gonna have it and in time for what?
Well, you know what? I was thinking that exact same thing. Like the 11th hour, he comes in with this sweeping, you can't do this, and
Right.
everything you just did is wrong, right? I really just naively assumed this was going to be taken care of.
Is there any sense in seeing if he plans to opine before town meeting? And if so, we delay our vote until then? I mean, we're green sheeting this anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have an issue with waiting if there was something impending. you
Right.
know?
If he has no plans to, that's a different story, but
So what I'll do is I plan this anyway, Julia. I'll talk to the town administrator tomorrow, and I'll talk through some of these things, and we'll figure it out. If he has an opinion and he has one to render, I'd like this committee to get it. What I mean is like an actual opinion.
yeah.
And not, maybe we can do that here
We don't
way
need
better
for that.
than anyone else. So,
That's true, yeah. Yeah, right.
so Article 2, offered by town, we now tie it to COLA. If there's any other questions on that, you please feel free to send them to me. That's really all I have up to this point. I really appreciate all the attention, the presentations, the questions, the discussion, the comments, sincerely from everyone, and the speakers who came in. I'm glad we had citizens come in. I think it made quite the difference this time around. That's what I
Instead
think.
of guessing what they were thinking.
Even if they just came in and said, we think you should do this no matter what, and walk out the door. At least they came in and they decided how they feel. And that's very important. So it's a little after 10. Do anyone want to have a motion?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second by Macy. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks,
Thank you, Warrant Committee. Thank you, Milton.
Thank you, Brian.